Getting ready.
You got the red light.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 17th, 2018 meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order, 7 o'clock. And we're going to start, as we usually do, with the approval of previous meeting minutes. And we're looking at the minutes of April 3rd, which was 2 weeks ago. And did everyone get a chance to take a look at that? Any comments or questions or edits?
Nope.
Okay, and do we have a motion to approve?
Yes.
Sarah with the motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Jim with the second. All in favor?
That's why I paused.
Aye. Okay, passed unanimously. All right, folks, tonight, this is a continuation, really, of the March 20th public hearing for Westridge North single-family plat. I just want to remind everybody, I know Lucy's going to start us off with some quasi-judicial questions and stuff, but I want to remind everybody that we do have a sign-in sheet here for those that would like to speak tonight. We ask that you please sign in, and when we do get to the public hearing portion, which will, again, be a continuation from the meeting, not the 2 weeks ago, but from March 20th, on this plat, we will ask you to speak during the public hearing part, and we'll have you speak for no more than 5 minutes each. So just a reminder on that. Lucy.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the quasi-judicial funness. So the trigger for a preliminary plat is subdividing land, with the UVDC at least, is subdividing land into more than 4 lots. And the UVDC's role is a recommender, makes a recommendation to council, and that makes this a quasi-judicial type of decision. That means that we're conducting a preliminary planning review for compliance with the development agreements, city and state codes, and the comprehensive plan. This is not a review of technical studies and documents, and not of architecture, materials, and colors. That's the ARC's responsibility, although Sarah Hoy is here to listen and carry forth. As a quasi-judicial proceeding, that means it is like a court, and the proceedings have to both be fair and appear fair. And we do that through 2 things. One is procedural due process and substantive due process. Procedural due process means that we follow a certain process. We give notice. We only have conversations in public. Substantive due process means we use the adopted regulations as the basis for our decision. And so, per a normal form, if you could read the questions and let me know in a moment, I'll ask whether your answers are yes or no. How many decision recommenders, commissioners, would answer no to all the questions? Okay. Carl and Jeff, could you speak to your yeses?
Sure, I'd answer no to all except number 5. I do own property in Issaquah Highlands, but not close to or near the subject property, just in the Highlands up on 16th Court.
Okay.
I also live in Issaquah Highlands. I live about a half mile away, I guess, from a property in the Brownstones.
Okay, thank you. The other piece is that all the conversations have to take place on the record. Ex parte contact means that you have a conversation outside of the proceedings. And so my question for the commissioners is, have you had any ex parte conversations?
I have not.
Okay.
I said hello to Richard tonight. That was it.
Uh-oh.
And Dan.
And then I would like to ask if anyone here objects to any of the commissioners' participation. Great. Okay, and I just want to touch on this. We talked about a little bit last time, the difference between a plat and a site development permit. A plat is the subdivision of land into parcels, tracts, and lots. It isn't the review of the design of them. But sometimes we have to look at the design to be able to know if a tract is appropriately sized, and so we are provided with some of that information. A site development permit, on the other hand, is the review of the design and the development of parcels, the kinds of uses, the arrangement, the parking, the buildings, the parks, et cetera, Both are for code compliance. It's just kind of a different level of information. Any questions? Okay. So tonight, this is the second half of the public hearing on the Westridge North preliminary plat. Last meeting, we began with a general presentation by both staff and the applicant, and followed by public comment and testimony and commissioners' questions and concerns. Tonight, we're not going to revisit that sort of introductory piece. We're going to focus on the briefing response memo, which has summarized the topics that were brought up and responds to those by staff and by the applicant. So that's why David Avenel is standing next to me, because as we go through, I'll make the first sort of presentation, and then if he has a piece he wants to add to that, he will. We're both available, obviously, for questions. So since we were talking about quasi-judicial permits, I wanted to touch on topic 6. This is the only one I'm doing out of order, which there was a concern that the process was not fair. And the purpose of the quasi-judicial process is to try and create a fair process where all the communication, as I mentioned, is in public and on the record, and so that everyone, including both applicants and the public, has both equal access and equal restrictions to the decision makers, which includes both the commission and the council. Everyone hears the same information. Everyone knows what the decision is being based on. Staff are considered neutral. Now, because we make a recommendation, we have to be able to stand up for that recommendation. So at times it sounds like we're advocating, but it is really just to explain the basis for our recommendation. We can be a conduit for anyone's communication to council or the commission. And all of this is really to ensure that we follow an appropriate process. Any questions?
Okay. For me.
So topic 1, the big kahuna, don't allow the conversion of High Street. So we've known for a while that Westridge would be developed at some point. The question was, how would it be developed, and how will things change as part of that development? The Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement gives pedestrians the priority, but we also have to ensure that there is vehicular functionality. Part of the way we do this to create a pedestrian-friendly environment is to have narrow streets with on-street parking and not having fast, no-parking collectors. In terms of the roads that are sort of being touched by or are associated with this plat, I wanted to touch on 3 of them: High Street, Street A, and Ellis Drive. High Street is being proposed for conversion. That is a big change. There will be the north end and the south end that will remain in their current configuration, but the middle quarter mile or so would be converted to this multi-use trail if the proposal is approved. Street A will become a neighborhood street. Under the proposal, it would have homes facing onto it with driveways and streets intersecting at various points where the grid is being connected to it. Ellis Drive, on the other hand, is going to be a, let me point to these. Yellow is High Street. Street A runs up the middle of the plat. Ellis runs mostly east-west. Ellis will be somewhat more direct and will not have driveways on it. It will have a regular series of intersections as the streets in Westridge South Townhomes and Westridge North Townhomes are built, but it won't have driveways directly accessing from it. So they'll each be different. But part of our goal is to have traffic that is driving at the posted speeds. And part of the reason we do that is it's consistent with the vision of the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement, and it's also safer. Slower streets are safer. They're not only safer for pedestrians, bicyclists, and children, but also drivers. And, by creating this High Street Park, we create an extensive area where it will be extremely safe for children to play because there won't be any cars. And our goal really is to try and design things that will encourage people to drive at the appropriate speed. As some of you know, Public Works Engineering is doing a lot of work in eastern part of Issaquah Highlands to do traffic calming and to get certain roads to be driven closer to the posted speed limits. So we're hoping that we are doing things as part of this plat that will further people driving at the posted speed.
Can I ask a question, Lucy?
Absolutely.
When you say that slower streets are safer and make that kind of blanket statement, can you kind of back that up? Where are you getting that information from?
So the reason I say that is because the biggest piece is that if someone is driving 20 miles an hour and they hit a pedestrian, the chances of fatality are massively lower. I don't remember the exact numbers. It's like 80%, 90% chance that you will survive, whereas at 35 and higher, it's significantly lower. So that's the big piece. I think that another piece of it is that with the driveways, for instance, that will be off the street, off of Street A, it's, having people driving slower gives people more time to react to all the kinds of activities that will be happening along the street. So I think those are the two big ones I would identify.
Thanks.
I have a question. Ellis, you talked about Ellis Street intersections as you're going past the crossing streets. What are what's happening at those intersections? Are they two-way stops, four-way stops? I know we're not going to have any, I don't think we're going to have any lights in there, but what's happening at each of those intersections as we go down from east to west? Do we know?
So you're reviewing Westridge North townhomes right now. And I looked to my engineer, I don't remember, they're definitely not four-way stops. I don't know if they, two-way stops. So
There's no stopping if you're going down Ellis, you wouldn't stop at all, correct?
If you're going north and south, you would hit a stop sign, right?
Right,
I just wanted to clarify that.
sure.
Thank you.
Tara, did you have a question?
It's a small thing. Is it L's Drive or Ellis Drive? Okay.
Ellis.
On the maps, it
L-I-S.
says L's, so.
Oh, oops. Sorry. And then there had been some questions about emergency services and what their involvement is with platting. So I just want to say, in general, plats go to both Eastside Fire and Rescue and the Issaquah Police Department for review. They have reviewed this plat and approved it for moving forward. They are adept at serving all kinds of neighborhoods, busy neighborhoods, non-residential, residential, tight, not so tight. And I think one of the things that comes out of this plat, by extending Ellis, for instance, is that it gives them a lot of choices in how to access West Highlands Park or any of the neighborhoods that are being built here. And my guess is that they would choose Ellis Drive as a direct and without the stop signs. Not that they probably have to stop for the stop signs, but it's at their discretion to pick which street is the most appropriate. And that's part of why we want an interconnected grid, because it gives them choices about how they get to the places they're going. And they've already, with the fire trucks and school buses, we have been looking at the turns, the auto turn studies to make sure that they can make the corners. We will continue to do that during the construction permits as the designs are refined to make sure that all the different kinds of trucks that need to use it can.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, can you go, actually go to the next slide? It might answer my question.
So this is about grades.
Yep.
Okay.
That's my question.
So the maximum allowed grade on city streets is 12%. It used to be 15%. However, all the streets within the Plat comply with 12%. Nothing is at 12%. They're all less than that. But as was kind of alluded to at our last meeting, many streets in the area are steeper. And you can see where we used to allow 15%. There are some 15% roads in Issaquah Highlands, especially in the eastern part. You can see that there's kind of a ridge right through here, and there are some streets at a variety of grades. You know, that is part of why I think people do move to Issaquah. It is a beautiful foothills community, and having roads that are not flat is kind of the nature of being in that area. I know there were a lot of comments last time about Discovery Drive and its connection to West Highlands Park and the grades of it. And I think a little bit of history on that might be useful, even though it's not related to the Plat, which was that West Highlands Park main connection used to be just High Street. But when the master developer was building some of the roads and improvements down in what we called East 42, because it was 42 acres, or West 45, sorry, because it was 45 acres. We said, you really need to connect Discovery Drive to West Highlands Park, and there was a lot of resistance. We said, it may not be necessary, but it does provide a lot of convenience rather than having to drive all the way to the north to then come back down south to I-90. And so we really encouraged them to do that, but it meant that it was connected at a steeper grade. And some residents have commented on that.
Mm-hmm.
And just, again, what is that grade at the end of Discovery into?
It's 15%.
Around
It's
15%.
15, it's on the middle.
This is an estimate.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So, yeah, and we're quite familiar, because Carl, you live on a 15% grade, and I live on a 14.5% grade, so I think we're familiar with those.
What's the width of the Ellis Drive now, the extension that's going to be going through there?
It's going to, I believe it is I love how much you think I have crammed in here.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I sadly do. 2 10-foot lanes and 7-foot on-street parking.
So I have a question at the south end of Street A, where it meets Ellis. You're making so a stop sign will be there if you're facing south, and you're going to make a left or right on Ellis. We're right at the edge there of a 10% grade. What does it look like to the east? So if I'm turning left out of there, how does that look with cars coming down? What's the visibility like? People tend to pick up a little bit of speed when they're going downhill. What does that look like? Because I suspect that we're going to see a lot of people coming out of there, particularly in the mornings, and making a left onto Ellis. Any idea what that looks like?
I don't remember what. Okay, so I just want to make Gary Shambro from the engineer for the applicant. So you're talking in this area?
Yeah, so if you're
Gary
turning
said
from-
he thinks this is
From
around
Street A.
5%.
Yeah, and I can tell you from running through there, you sort of hit a plateau once you go up that steep part. So where that will be, I think, this is speculation. I'm not doing an engineering study, but I think you have pretty good sight lines.
So let me just point out a couple of things. Where you have those kind of intersections, you would have a landing. So even though it's a little steeper on one side and a little flatter on the other, it's going to be pretty flat at the intersection. We've also required through the Plat a sight distance easement over this little parcel down here at the south
I recall that, yeah.
to ensure that there are good sight lines to see.
So I guess I was just thinking, and you had mentioned earlier that, as permits are being submitted and then ultimately approved or not, that I think that's one to really look at, because that would concern me a little bit in terms of left turns out of there.
Okay?
I suspect it will be fine based on the engineering studies, but, when we get to reality and things get graded, I think it's worth looking at just to be sure we're not having to go back and fix something that is unsafe
Okay.
from the beginning.
Yeah, unsafe, not good. There were also some questions about whether the Lakeside Trail, which is number 4 in the upper left-hand corner, since it's parallel, is it a substitute for converting High Street to a trail? And I think after looking at it, we would say no. And the reason is that it could be 15 or 20 or more years before that trail number 4 here is built. And we don't think it's really as convenient or as direct as High Street Trail will be. There's about a 20, up here, it's about a 40-foot grade change, and down here, it's about a 20-foot grade change. It also will not have very convenient points of connection up here. It's really meant more as an internal connection between lakeside communities, really, than a connection route to a larger area.
It's speculative anyway, because who knows if it's ever going to get built.
And not only that, but it's, Lakeside is a separate development agreement. It's not the Issaquah Highlands, so
Yeah.
theoretically, I mean, it's supposed to
And
have
they
some
don't have
relationship
yeah,
to
They
it,
don't have to
but,
do anything either.
well, yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at that development agreement, but I
No, I'm
don't,
saying in general, the development agreement could expire.
theoretically. But I guess what I was thinking was, we usually don't take into consideration adjoining properties to satisfy the needs of the current one, which is Issaquah Highlands. And, you know, while I think that's interesting to talk about and know about, I just don't see that as relevant here.
So, one thing we did was try and look at what are our alternatives, too many A's. So what we did was look at, try and kind of in a schematic way, look at the 3 alternatives that we could identify. So the left-hand one is the proposed plat, which is still the administration's recommendation. There are several pros that we see in that one, that there would be this significant non-motorized connection, a significant valley overlook, a linear park on the edge of the plateau, and 2 access routes to West Highlands Park. The main con is that High Street will change. Alternative 2 would look at keeping High Street open, but keeping the rest of the plat the same. And so one of the pros of that one, probably the main pro, is that High Street wouldn't change. We wouldn't get the non-motorized segment, the overlook, or the park, and we would be in conflict with the urban design guidelines, which say don't have your fences and backs of houses to roads. And there was a statement made at the last meeting that the guidelines were discretionary, and while they are guidelines, they are requirements in the sense that the objectives are laid out, the methods for implementing those objectives are flexible. So objectives are fixed, methods are flexible.
And it's something that we've looked at in many other discussions as well.
So,
Applied.
so just to be clear, and I was trying to think of, are there other places in Issaquah Highlands where you'd have the same scenario that have been built out? And what comes to mind is Park Drive at 15th heading east. Those townhomes, their backyards face Park Drive. So we,
Although I think they're significantly below.
some are. As you go up the
Yes,
hill,
yes,
they get
you're right.
further below. So I'm just trying to think of
Yeah.
other areas where it's happened, because it's not that it hasn't happened.
Right.
Also on Falls Drive, if I remember correctly, there are backs of houses that face, is it Falls?
Yes, but that's Pinecrest that's like 30 feet up in the air.
Sorry, not Pinecrest, not Falls. What's the?
College.
College Drive, sorry, thank you. On the way up to the school and the Bellevue College
Are
property.
you thinking of Division 7, the Trammell Crow, Avalon Bay? Sorry,
Yes.
I have to get up to this
Yes.
century.
Yeah. The backs of those
Right.
are facing College Drive,
Right.
correct?
Now, the one thing I would say about that is College Drive, no one had an idea of College Drive
I
when that
understand,
was built. But you're right.
trying to create some parallels, so to speak.
Sure.
And I don't know if there are any others in the Highlands. I was really racking my brain, didn't have time to drive around the entire community, but I can't think of any others. And I think both of those are significantly different than this particular scenario, but they do exist, and it's something to think about.
Okay. The third scenario would be to leave High Street unchanged and to reconfigure the plat. Again, the pro would be that High Street would remain unchanged, and there would be front doors facing High Street. On the other hand, with the front doors facing High Street, the driveways would be, so then you would create more like Street A scenario facing High Street. It would eliminate a lot of the on-street parking that we've tried to get through the Plat. There would be less neighborhood cohesiveness, mainly because the houses wouldn't face each other across the street. They would have backyards, they'd be backyard to backyard. Westridge Way, which is this street right here, would likely be offset because I'm assuming that there would be some sort of street or VUNERF or something along here to provide access to the houses. And then we wouldn't get the things that we've been talking about, the non-motorized segment, the park, and the overlook. I think the other thing is that would be important to think about is it would require the redesign of the Plat, and we would have to identify a basis for asking. I think that these are all possibly approvable, but they are not, if the one that they have proposed complies, I think the challenge is why would we require that they not build it? What would be our basis for requiring that they redesign it, I guess is a better way to put it.
I have a question on that previous slide.
Sorry.
Sorry if I'm not following. So in alternative one, if we were to High Street changes, what are the houses facing High Street then, or?
No, they're facing the interior of they're
It's in Road
facing
A.
Street A.
So then would that non-motorized connection be lined with fences?
Probably. But there would be more room. They would have the recreational activities. And here's the way, I asked myself that question as well, Tara. And what I was thinking about was one of the kinds of recreational activities that we have in the urban design guidelines are these pocket parks. And when you think about the sort of scale of recreational activities that have been proposed along pocket park sized, and the sort of the most classic pocket park has a home on either side. So they often are, you're giving privacy to the lots that are immediately around it while providing this neighborhood amenity. And so while we do have parks where the front doors of the houses open right into the park, and that is a great thing, we also have many parks where houses have fences that provide a level of privacy from the public facility.
But most likely in alternative one, there would be a non-motorized trail that would just be kind of have a fence barrier kind of to protect the privacy of the homes with the runners or people that are using the non-motorized trail, or?
There would be, I don't know, between maybe 20 feet between the edge of the trail, 20 to 30 feet between the edge of the trail and a fence. I have a slide a little bit later that shows this. So I think one of the differences is that if you left the street in place with the sidewalks on either side, the fences would be very close to the sidewalk. Whereas when you're taking out half of the roadway and the sidewalks, you're creating more of a park-like area that's gives you an opportunity to landscape and put in those recreational pocket parks along it. And the guideline is really focused on the street experience and is not particularly directive to the parks. But I agree with you. You want to have the parks have a good experience as well. Any more questions on this one? Okay.
Yep.
So I just kind of want to walk you guys through, when we design a plat layout for a new community in the Highlands up here, the overall goal is really to provide a cohesive neighborhood that has a distinct identity that fits into the community up here. During the plat design phase, we looked at a variety of site plan configurations. Lucy just went through some of them with you. But we feel the proposal tonight is the best option that does meet this overall goal that we have. the primary site plan alternative to the current proposal we have tonight is really, orienting the fronts of homes onto High Street. And, there's several reasons why we did not move forward with that direction. The biggest issue, is that is that when we created the homes facing High Street, it would result in the loss of a face-to-face internalized neighborhood where homes face each other on a neighborhood street, which in this case would be Street A, lining right through here. All these homes face each other, have a nice relationship with each other, and it's a community feel to it. In the alternative scenario, there'd be a row of front-loaded homes onto High Street and another row of front-loaded homes that would face Street A looking towards the future Shelter Holdings commercial project. So you have two scenarios there where one row of homes would be looking at a great view. The other row of homes they'd have their back to, and they'd be looking at, a more high-intensity commercial use, and also the back of the townhome project as well. So right there, it kind of creates, this two different neighborhoods in a way. And it's not cohesive. It doesn't create a welcoming neighborhood feel or create this singular identity for the community that we're trying to achieve. Another issue that we've thought through there would be just the overall reconstruction of High Street to install driveways with the front doors accessing the homes facing High Street. In this alternative scenario, on-street parking would be introduced. You've got front doors, you've got driveways, you have people backing out of these driveways onto High Street, and, to make up for parking, we would also probably have some parallel stalls there as well. So I think through that line of thinking, our conclusion was that, the current proposal was something that was better for the Westridge neighborhood in front of you, and it provides, this cohesive identity that we're trying to achieve here. And frankly, we feel that it gives the community as a whole in the Highlands a really nice amenity that has some of the best views in the city. So.
Thank you, David.
So topic 2 had to do with the conversion of High Street and concerns around some of the activities. So as I mentioned, a plat is really about sizing things and not the design. The concepts are provided to assist in the plat review. The process going forward would be that the UVDC makes a recommendation, the council makes a decision, and if the plat is approved, then we would go to administrative site development permits to review the parks and trail, and then construction permits. There is no requirement of a certain minimum number of square feet per dwelling unit, but it is an expectation of each project. And because there isn't a requirement, there aren't specific facilities that are required. Now, a concept has been put forward with grass, swings, skate area, plazas, that are intended to serve all ages and complement the uses in the area and not create nuisances. The right-of-way would be, ownership would be retained by the city with no change, and the IHCA would maintain it. There were some questions about buffers. I looked into that to see if there were any requirements in the development agreement. The only requirement for setbacks from residences if there is 5-foot or taller play equipment, which isn't proposed at this time. But there is vertical separation, which is not required. So you can see here that this is just one of many sections that the applicant provided. Here's the backyard. There's a 5 or 6 foot drop, and this is the distance over to the trail. So that gives you some sense. This is, say, 15 or 18 feet, so we're probably at 20 to 25 feet between the trail and the edge of the yards. We did take the concerns of the commission very seriously. We looked at potentially flipping. We're taking out half the road. And so we looked at, well, maybe we should take out the other half that's closer to the edge, put the recreational facilities there and leave the sidewalk and road where it is. And the reason that we didn't do that is that all the stormwater facilities are on that edge, towards the edge of the plateau. And with a steep slope there between, we just didn't want to have something that might add more water in that area. And so we left the trail where it was. But we did poke around with that for a while.
So, sorry,
Yep,
I'm slow. So in that diagram below where there's the pink tree,
yep.
is it, just to orient myself, with the walkway where the two people are walking would be High Street, if
Yeah.
it were?
This would be the trail.
And if there were fence, so the housing would be sort of the back deck or back of the house,
Right,
and then a fence would probably go about where you're talking about.
right.
So the line of sight would, it would kind of blend in a little bit as far as where the height of the house is down to the, wouldn't be like this giant fence.
No. First of all, I believe that we have a condition that requires the fences to be open, and they're limited in height, so they wouldn't be 6 feet tall and solid. And then also because of the scale of the area that's here and the variety of potential activities, there would be trees and shrubs and things that would soften that edge.
What does open mean to you? What does that mean?
I don't know if we put a specific percentage on it. I believe that in other locations where Polygon has done this, it's about 50% open.
Does that mean there's doors or there's ways to passage through? Or is that like a gate, a mesh sort of fence?
It usually means, it is typically meant a board fence where like every other board is not present.
So you can kind of see.
You can kind of see through it. Now, from my perspective, if they wanted to put gates out into these spaces, we had the same discussion with Westridge South, I think that would be fabulous. That has not been something that they have wanted to do. I think it could happen in the future. And that kind of evolution may happen over time, and I think that would be great. But that isn't proposed at this time.
Lucy, just to clarify on that, you know, we got this packet, and it was making comparisons to walkways, or I forget, what did you, linked, what did you call the trail that you were proposing? Anyway, with New Orleans and New York.
Yeah.
And in all these pictures and whatnot, all but I think one, there were pavers. And just to clarify, we're talking about leaving the asphalt as is, not replacing with pavers or anything like that.
Right, and we'll touch
Okay.
on that. I sort of flipped my presentation around, and so those images are the closer. High
Okay.
Street is the closer, but it's a good question, because I did want to, I think it is an excellent point that is not asphalt. The one in New Orleans is asphalt, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But a High Line, you're right, is not an asphalt facility. Any more questions here? So just to conclude, there were edits to 2 conditions and a new condition that we proposed. The left-hand condition, number 32, we proposed adding some language to capture some of the things we're talking about in terms of the uses, complementing things that are in the area, not duplicating them, not putting noisy and nuisance uses near residences. For condition number 35, the applicant has proposed, in response to the commission request, that instead of completing the High Street Trail before the last 2 houses, it would be the last 10 homes. And then we added a new condition that would bring the administrative site development permit for the trail and parks back to the commission, if the plat is approved, for discussion about the types and locations of uses. So that our goal was to try and let us focus on the plat, but to recognize the concerns and desire for discussion.
Lucy, question on the first highlight in condition 32, where it said complement rather than duplicate activities already provided or planned in the area. What's the definition of the area? What does the area mean?
I think we would be looking west of 9th Avenue, so in the Westridge and West Highlands Park area. You are seeing some of the plats and site development permits for Westridge properties, and then there are certain parks and facilities that are provided in West Highlands Park. And I think that's a good point, that when we come back to you, we need to sort of provide that context.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this?
Actually, I do have one quick question. So just to be clear, I'm looking at the sequencing and the timing, the 10 homes versus 2. Thank you for addressing that. Still not planning to build in phases, correct? It's going to be one big build-out? Okay. All right, that's really all I wanted to know. Just make sure that was clear. Thanks.
So I just wanted to add, we do understand that, the detail here, the devil is in the details here for the trail amenities that we're looking at. And we heard the comments from the last meeting. We have agreed to this new condition 37, and, we see the value in the condition. We're looking forward to hearing more from you guys as we move forward at the next meeting. Just to show you here, go through a little bit of the multipurpose trail. There were some questions on it. The trail portion of the program will be, we've talked through this and we'll touch on it later in the presentation as well, but it will be a newly paved trail grade asphalt surface, approximately about 15 feet wide. There'll be some gentle grades on it for walking, cycling, and running. The photo in the bottom right-hand corner, that's to give you a little bit of the type of asphalt surfacing that we're planning here. This is a photo from the Washington Park Arboretum that just redid their pathways, but that's about the type of surfacing we're talking about here. The photo in the left-hand corner there, so this is a photo of an asphalt trail that runs next to some homes in Southern California. And it's obviously not the same feel we're going for here, but I think it shows you spatially the relationship that we're talking about here with a trail that's multi-use that is, adjacent to these homes. And we can kind of get into that further as we go in the process, so. And here are a few of the images we're taking inspiration from.
David, could you go back to that
Oh, sure.
previous slide, please?
Yeah.
So help clarify for me, the lower right-hand picture, would that represent in the upper one where looks like the bicycle and the
Right.
person are?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so, but that would be new asphalt. I thought you said earlier you're using the existing street.
Looking at me?
I thought you said that. Lucy, is it the existing street or new asphalt?
So that's going to be our next topic, because we have required them to grind down the road and put trail grade asphalt instead of street grade asphalt,
Thank you.
with some highlights.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So here are a few of the images that, we're taking some inspiration notes from here on the different, activity nodes or pocket parks, whatever you want to call them. We envision using some form of a tiered seating arrangement here, in the upper left-hand corner there. Different park furniture, but we think that's kind of a cool concept, and we can kind of use the grades a little bit in our favor. The telescope is kind of an obvious one with the Overlook Park. It's a great, example where you can utilize something like that. The swing park is a little bit of an idea that we've had. There's been some outreach from the IHCA to really mention that the Mommy and Me swing is something that the Hill has wanted for a while, and that's currently something that we're proposing. There was a mention at last meeting of some of the fitness equipment might be something that would be used. So these are just a few of the concepts that we're combing through right now, and we can kind of dive into those as we move along in the process. And then here's a few of the landscape concepts we're discussing, possibly alongside the trail here. We envision these areas to have a bit of an arboretum character with different plantings that are unique to the area, and not necessarily native plantings that you see all over the Highlands right now. We want there to be a little bit of a splash of color, and one idea would be wildflower borders kind of lining the trail, some rhododendrons possibly, various flower patches and, places to sit and relax and whatnot. There was some, we're kind of discussing right now with the IHA of what might make sense, but one of these pumpkin picture is kind of an idea that we had that you could do something seasonally, and it might be you could have bulbs in the springtime for kids to go plant tulip bulbs, and you could have a fall display of pumpkins or a grow the biggest pumpkin contest or something silly like that. So it's stuff we're considering right now and what we're working through.
So when you say non-native, is that because you're trying to get a contrast, or is what?
Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Did you say that the plants would be non-native?
They're more of an arboretum character. I mean, I guess what I was trying to really articulate is that they're a little more than just an evergreen shrub or something that you see, on the hill today. I think we want it to stand out and be kind of a little bit of a garden setting.
Okay, so more contrast or more something unusual, or?
Yeah, and it's something, a destination where you can walk the family through and look at the pretty flowers and look at the view. So this slide here is just a comparison of the previous single-family communities we've built out in the Highlands over the last few years. Just how they stack up with open space comparisons. Forest Ridge at the top there, that was 87 single-family homes, and we were a little bit over 29,000 square feet on that one. Westridge South, which we're currently building out, is 72 single-family homes. We're coming in a little over 31,000 square feet, and as you can see, Westridge North, which we're proposing 73 homes on, is 37,596 square feet. I guess I show this to illustrate the amount of open space that we intend to deliver for the community. It's not a small amount, as we've historically experienced here. It should be mentioned that this calculation doesn't take into account the multipurpose trail, which would add on about probably another 25,000 square feet in that range. So we think it's a huge amenity for the community, and we really look forward to getting going. So, Uzi.
Thank you, David.
So High Street materials, to sort of riff off of what David was showing. Asphalt is an allowed material for a multi-use trail. And there are certain users that actually prefer it for certain kinds of sports. And it's not an unusual material when you look at trails in the area. For instance, the Pickering Trail near Pickering Barn and Costco is asphalt. The East Lake Sammamish Trail is also, and then the trail along the edge of West Highlands Park is as well. We did talk a bit about the kind of asphalt and the difference between trail grade asphalt and road grade. And so we added a new condition that said that the trail would be ground down and overlaid with trail grade, and that different kinds of paving and markers to sort of mark nodes, for instance, where the east-west trails are coming out, as well as street furniture, plantings, wayfinding would be incorporated. The pictures on the right are from Crescent Park, which is it's the top of the levee along the river in New Orleans, and I was there between these two meetings. So I'm always on the out. My family loves traveling with me. And so I'm always on the outlook for interesting parks, and I thought that this one was kind of an apt comparison. It's mostly asphalt, but the dark black is where the railroad siding were pulled out and laid with these tracks, where the tracks used to be, and they sort of create these paths and patterns. And then at each of the street crossings, they have laid in mostly brick, but occasionally granite, almost like cobblestones, and then with these street markers, so that even though you can't cross to the streets because there are railroad tracks between you and the rest of the streets, you have this sense of where you are on the trail. Now, in contrast, we would have connections where all those streets are, but it would kind of give you a sense of where you are and orientation marking. Any questions before I move on?
I think what I'm seeing is pretty clear, but I just want to make sure I fully understand, because one of the concerns of the public, and my concern as well, was that, and forgive me, developer, I don't mean this literally, but that it would be a sort of a cheap covering of the current road, and that we would just, have additional sidewalks or additional amenities there, and not literally just sort of start fresh, for lack of a better way. And maybe you may not start fresh completely, but to the point where it's a deliberate building of this amenity, this park, rather than just covering existing, road and keeping some open because it's already asphalt.
Well, and I think that's part of why I chose to include Crescent Park and Highline, which I'll show at the end, because these are adaptive reuse of things that we might, looking at them in their original form, might seem like detritus to just be gotten rid of. But what they did was adaptively reuse these facilities in ways that created something special and memorable for the community that becomes very popular gathering spaces, and yet it isn't necessarily rebuilding from scratch, but rebuilding intentionally. And I that's kind of what I hear in your description, Jeff, is it's not that you have to rip everything out, but that it should feel like, in the end, what you've got is something that makes sense, that feels like it's there for the purpose, and that it really creates this special public space and not just a leftover bit that has nice plantings next to it.
Right. Jeff is always a little bit more eloquent than me. And I might be the dummy in the group, but honestly, when I read in here that a third to a half of the road is going to be taken away, I was thinking that 2/3 to 1/2 of the road was going to stay there, and that was going to be the trail.
Well, so the trail the road is about 30 feet wide. So 15 feet is what they are currently suggesting. That's half the road.
Right, but I was thinking that the asphalt as it exists now, that it was going to be kind of torn down the middle or something, and that was going to be the trail. You're talking about using a trail grade asphalt to replace what's there.
So I would not say, so what I think it's like resurfacing a road.
Right.
But it's picking a different grade of asphalt to do it so that you get a smoother finish, and adding these sort of insets or other design elements that kind of punctuate it and make this not just half a road.
Right, well, but again, in my head, you're talking about High Street. As it is today, it's not going to be there anymore. It's going to be something different.
Evolve into something different, yeah.
And Lucy, what's the surface of this, harken back to the diagram, the smaller left-hand trail?
I don't think, because this is just a concept for plat review, we have not really gotten down to that level. I think that would be a completely appropriate question when we come back to you
Okay.
if the plat's approved, but I don't think we know that now.
Knew it might be premature, but I wanted to know. Just
Okay.
sort of goes, when you use a comment like the East Lakes Mammoth Trail, which I'm use all the time, I'm just sort of curious because I was on it today, and part of it's asphalt, part of it's gravel. You wonder about those things. So, thank you.
How long has High Street been developed? I mean, do we have an answer to that? Like, how many years?
I think it was in the early 2000s. I don't remember
So
exactly.
historically not very long or meaningful to the community in that respect?
I think West Highlands Park may tell you otherwise this
Okay.
evening.
So I'm not trying to, but I mean,
think
but I
what
do
it-
like the idea of having some kind of historical reference or connection to the community or connection to the past, and maybe we could look even beyond that road. Maybe there's like animal migrations or things like that that could bring connectivity to the space that is meaningful to the community, so.
Right, and I think that was part of the point that the commission made last time was, We aren't designing just for people today. We're trying to think long-term about how's the community building and growing, and what kinds of things do we need to be a more complete community. But that's, I think, one of the values and opportunities of coming back and having that discussion once we're through the plat, assuming it's approved, that it gives everyone an opportunity to really then just focus on that more limited selection of things and say, what kinds of facilities really make sense that will complement the things that are already here. And so I think that's going to be a great opportunity to touch on those very things.
And if I could add, I don't want to minimize the importance of High Street today as a vehicular connection point, to some degree pedestrian and bikes as well, but let's be real, it's mostly for driving, getting to and from West Highlands Park. And I want to minimize the value of that to the people who live in West Highlands Park, because it is very important. It also could be very important to folks that are that will eventually be living in these new communities that abut that, whether it's this plat or the other ones, and potentially the Shelter Holdings property as well. So it's something we have to really consider. It is taking away a significant and valuable road for vehicles. Now, that said, the benefit there is to a subset of the community, which is not a bad thing. It's just a reality. And potentially, a park like this, if it's done right and everything else fits into place, this could be an amenity that a lot of people would use. Now, not saying they don't walk down High Street today, but I doubt it's a destination in and of itself. So I think there are two sides of the coin here that we need to look at and understand the impact of both.
So topic 4 is the design of Street A. There were some questions about that. Should it have on-street parking, for instance? And I went back and looked at the street standards for Issaquah Highlands, and all the sort of local neighborhood streets have on-street parking, whereas the higher speed, higher capacity streets don't. So I think that is an indication that on-street parking is seen as a traffic calming element.
I'm sorry, can you stop there for a second? Are you talking about in the Highlands specifically, or just in general?
Well, I would say it probably is in general, but the comment that I have here is based on the street standards for Issaquah Highlands.
But what would you consider a higher speed street in the Highlands?
Well, so the thing I would say is that the street classifications include a bunch of street types that were never built in Issaquah Highlands. Mm-hmm. So some of them were designed for like 45 miles an hour. And none of those included on-street parking.
Yeah, but none of them were built either.
No, but, right, and I think that mostly we have tried to build the lower speed streets because that was the character that both the city and the master developer wanted.
Yeah, and I would say that maybe higher speeds is not the right terminology here, because it's not necessarily higher speeds, but the more thoroughfares, if you will, 25th, maybe 24th, Park Drive, Federal, I think, even Discovery to some degree on the east side, they all have on-street parking.
Yes, well, most of them do. Park Drive was built without on-street parking originally.
But it has it now.
It does now.
Yeah, in lots of places.
And that was something after we'd done a lot of build-out that we just realized that second lane, at some point in the future, we could reclaim that second lane. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there's a desire to do that. You're right. Parts of Discovery Drive have on-street parking. Parts of Discovery Drive don't. Most of Highlands Drive and 9th have on-street parking, but not all of it. So, some of those, you're right, some of those streets that are more of our thoroughfares
I just can't think of a street that doesn't have it, in the Highlands at least. Mm-hmm. Not a single one, unless I'm wrong, but, so.
So there's a little bit of difference in width between them, maybe like 28 or 30 for High Street and 34 curb to curb for Street A. In terms of some of the traffic calming elements that are included, I think it's the sort of lazy S, you can see the Texan in me coming out, configuration does slow traffic rather than the long straight streets like 25th and 24th where we're doing some of the traffic calming. We are proposing curb bulbs and trying to keep the streets narrow but functional. All of those contribute to traffic calming. There were some questions about crosswalks. On a street like this, the city does not typically stripe the crosswalks at intersections, but we will be striping the trail crossings where they occur. And so, in conclusion, we just say that with the conditions, this plat meets the city standards and the development agreement standards. There was don't extend Park Drive. If we look at the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement, there was an expectation for an interconnected street system. That term is used pervasively throughout the urban design guidelines, and that dead-end streets are really used in unavoidable circumstances, such as at the edge of a project, topography, critical areas are 3 examples I can think of. In terms of connecting the street grid, traffic analysis is certainly one part of it, but we're also looking at creating a fine-grained pedestrian scale system. And when you look at the urban design guidelines, it really does make the streets the first choice for pedestrian connectivity. If you can't have a street, then you use a trail. But in general, we're prioritizing streets first. There was a question about whether it was really anticipated that the streets would connect through, and the upper images point to the sort of stubs. This is Park Drive, but the same thing occurs at Federal, where you can see from the sort of orange lines how the right-of-way is already kind of stubbing into the property. And even when we started working at back in 2014 and 2015 on the sort of overall plans before we drilled down on the individual plats and site development permits, the overall plans had Park Drive connecting, but you can see in both of these there's more, but I just picked these 2, that Street A used to have not connect to High Street at the north end, and to be able to make that connection topographically, that changed some of the grades, and at the time we thought that would preclude Park Drive going through, but as we mentioned that when we started looking at the Plat grades, we could see that it was possible and it seemed consistent with the development agreement. In terms of a VUNERF to a road connection, this, though very, very different scale, up in sort of North Issaquah Highlands, there is an area just off of, say, 25th and Magnolia, where Logan crosses 25th. It goes from being a street section to a VUNERF. So you can see that the 2 10-foot lanes carry through in this sort of transparent orange area, but then the right-of-way widens out for the other elements, which in this case were sidewalk and planting strip. Part of what we're trying to do is provide that connectivity and complete the grid that provides a connection for all modes of travel. But we also want to, at the same time, communicate that there is a change in neighborhood, that you're going from a higher intensity to a much lower intensity. The buildings will be much closer to the road, and it will, we will of course put up signs, but it will also non-verbally communicate this change from one neighborhood to another.
Do you have a diagram, I know you do, I just don't know which one it is, but that has this plat and the plat further east that takes us through to about Grand Ridge that we could take a look at, a little bit larger one? And I want to ask a question about this particular Park Drive connection.
Is that what you're talking?
Yeah. So, okay, so the property lines are there in yellow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the west side of that yellow line is the property we're talking about?
So this is the plat.
And then the
we're
right
talking-
and the right side of the property line is the Shelter Holdings
This,
property?
this is owned by Shelter. This
Okay.
is owned by Polygon.
Right. Okay, so Park Drive I know we don't know what's happening on the shelter property yet, and I know there are a lot of questions about Park Drive going through it or not. But my question is there a reason, sure there is, but I would like to understand it, why we're doing a VUNRF on the eastern portion of the Polygon property instead of making that a proper road in potential anticipation of a fully, I can't understand why Park Drive would not go all the way through, and I'll address the Logan Street diagram for a moment, or the example, and that is, this is a very different situation where Park Drive is the main road east-west for our community, or east, or west, I should say, in this case. Also, you're talking about a main connection to another couple of main, like communities. So actually coming off of Highlands Drive or 9th, getting into these communities is very different than going between 24th and 25th on Logan, because those are really access to, specific developments, not large-scale developments, but smaller developments. And it's really just local access, if you will, as opposed to through access or getting to one community. So I don't actually agree with that comparison. I think they're two very different things. Now, how the roads connect may be a good comparison, but I don't think the scenarios are a good comparison. So my question there is there any reason why we can't have the main road on the western part of Polygon, and besides, hey, we'd have to take out one of the homes or something, is there a reason why it's a VUNRF and not an actual road?
So I think maybe you were referring to Heron, which I had shown last time, which is the continuation
Sorry,
of
yes.
24th. That's okay.
Yep.
This is the slide I used last time. So I think part of the reason that we went to something that was very different is you are absolutely right that if you look at this, Park Drive is a significant road coming through all the way through the community, gets to Highlands, gets to 9th. A lot of traffic is going to peel off, but some traffic is going to continue into the shelter property. And it seemed to us very important that there be nonverbal and signs that communicate that you're not just supposed to keep going, that Park Drive does not, that while a connection for all modes to Street A is a useful connection of that grid, it is not just, there's not a point. You don't just keep going all the way to Street A because it gets you someplace. It's more of a convenience connection, the fine-grained pedestrian and vehicular kind of infrastructure, but not, we wouldn't want all the traffic from Park Drive to just keep going and dump into Street A.
Yeah, and my response, I understand that, thank you. My response to that would be, though, that, High Street is a part of this conversation. We're taking away a significant piece of road. And I'm not anticipating most people coming from Park Drive, except maybe those that might be up at the school or at the park or something, or, some of the restaurants or whatever. But anticipating people coming up 9th or up Highlands and going home onto Street A down that direction in West Highlands Park. So really more of an access for in and out for those communities to get onto the main road. So I don't actually see it as, hey, everyone's coming up from Park Drive and let's just keep going past all the commercial stuff and see where we end up. I see it as a relatively significant entry and exit point for those communities down there. So is it an option to actually extend on the east side of the Polygon property to make that a proper street as opposed to a VUNRF?
So have 3 exits instead of,
Well, we still don't know what's happening at shelter, so I know that that's still a question, but
right,
I mean.
potentially then.
Yeah, and I suppose, to me, it makes the most sense for it to continue all the way through, but.
I
that's
will
not
say,
for me
though,
to
that
say.
I don't drive this nearly as much as you guys do, but there's been plenty of times where I've seen people go through there and get stuck where Park ends because they can't figure it out. They can't figure out how to get on to, what is that, 9th that comes through there? The main street?
This is 9th right here.
We can't legislate intelligence, unfortunately.
That because you were stuck there? Or?
Is that on the record, Susan? So anyway, that's my thought, and I don't know, it just seems to me like if we weren't considering taking away High Street, then I might see that as, yeah, that's not one of your main roads, but I do think people need options to get in and out of these communities, West Highlands Park and this plat as well, and then whatever future plats are going in. I just think more interconnectivity is better than less.
Right. I'm not sure that you lose the connectivity. It will be slow and narrow and different. And I think relative to could it be a street, I would say yes, it could be. It would. I think they've already squeezed the plat down, so it would mean moving a house into some other neighborhood, which I'm sure they'd be glad to tell you how unexcited they are about that.
I'm sure that would not be fun, but that's not.
But it's not that we couldn't make it a street. I think that our concern would be how do we do that in a way that doesn't encourage that to become a thoroughfare.
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that that's a bad thing in this case, if High Street goes away, because otherwise, you know, you're sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul right here, and so you're moving people in different directions. And I think that it's a viable outlet and inlet for those communities, and yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody else agrees, and I may be 100% wrong, but it just seems to me that would make the most sense.
I guess I don't necessarily agree with that, just because I think there's already, you know, we've got Ellis and then Street A up to High Street. You know, that's still going to be an option to get out. So just like it is now, it's a replacement for the rest of High Street. So I mean, I'm not sure I understand the robbing Peter to pay Paul in that, yeah, you may be doing a little of that, but it's not uneven. It's still a zero sum in the end. So I'm not sure. Because, I mean, in terms of egress, it's definitely going to be for the folks that are really driving on Street A.
Can we see an image of the plat with the homes on it and this at Park Drive, please? I mean, the plat with the images of the homes on it, so I can kind of see how Street A and the homes look next to Park Drive. And I'm not trying to open up a can of worms here. I just am thinking, and I will say on the other hand, I've heard a lot of people talk about, in some of these letters and stuff, talk about how, you know, Discovery Drive is the way they're going to get in and out of West Highlands Park. And I do think there are options there, so I'm not saying there aren't. I do believe that there are. And so I don't want to focus just on that, especially if people are coming from the north.
Right.
You know, they're going to come down other directions, so.
Well, one thing I would say is, you know, there's going to be this series of connections. There's High Street, there's Park, there's Federal, and there's, no, I left Ellis out, sorry, and then Discovery, just serving this whole area. High Street is two-way, Ellis is two-way, Discovery is two-way. Park and Federal are part of the couplet. And so from Federal is now two-way between 9th and, I should probably go back to this just so you
Right.
can see it.
It's actually a really good point, because are you saying that Park would have to be a one-way going west?
No, but I do think, so here's, let me see if I can round up my thoughts. So Park Drive is two-way until you get to here, and then it's one-way. Federal is, we're assuming two-way, and then one-way. And so if you are going, there's a limited amount of traffic that will be, you know, likely to be coming in on Federal. But there may be more traffic heading out, just because if you're going to Issaquah Highlands or you're going other ways, you can use that. Park Drive, on the other hand, is one way from here, and so it will mostly be traffic heading westbound into the community. You could head eastbound and make your turns at 9th Avenue, don't misunderstand me, but I guess our concern is just too much traffic using Park Drive all the way to Street 8. Those streets should really function more as neighborhood streets
Yep.
than continuing those as thoroughfares.
Yeah, I guess what I'm seeing, though, is less about east-west and more about, because our main roads are Highlands Drive and 9th. People are going, they're coming and going, they're going to the freeway, they're coming from the freeway, they're coming from Fred Meyer or whatever, and they're turning. And I'm anticipating that people are going to turn. I actually think you said Federal won't see a lot of traffic heading west. I disagree. I think people are going to come up Highlands Drive. If they live in the middle of this Plat, they're going to drive down Federal and go into the neighborhood. Why would they go down Ellis or Discovery to go further north through more neighborhoods? I just don't see it happening. And I feel the same way about Park, that people might go up Highlands Drive, make a left and Park. And actually coming out of those neighborhoods, do you think if somebody's living in the middle of that block, that Plat, that they're going to go north or south to get out of the community? No, they're just going to head west, or east, sorry. And they're going to go through the Wunner. From my concern, because I think about the Wunner in front of Ashland Park as an example, it's a perfectly drivable street, but it's not real practical as a through street, right? The only time I use it is if there's a delivery truck or something on, Katsura and 15th. So I just am concerned about how many people might try and use that Wunner going out, and I don't think it's designed for that. I don't know. Traffic engineer?
Okay.
I don't know
And if
you
it's
agree with
there, it's like, traffic is like water. It flows and it
Yeah.
looks for the
Right.
least resistance, and it's
Right.
going to find it.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my biggest concern, and, I'm no expert in that area, but I'm thinking from a practical standpoint that it's probably going to be used more than we're designing it to be.
Okay.
So,
I wanted to, earlier this week, we forwarded a letter from Shelter to you guys, and I just wanted to, and I gave you copies this evening, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of points that are brought up in the letter. First of all, the letter refers to Appendix A and this Principle 2 about a pedestrian-friendly community. That's provided on the left. We agree that that is a major priority of the community. There are some specifics in Appendix A, but not necessarily a lot of detail about how you do a pedestrian-friendly community. The right hand is from the Urban Design Guidelines, specifically under trails, which speaks the most to the design of the pedestrian circulation system. And I think really the point of providing that is something I mentioned earlier, which is that streets are our first choice. Trails are our second choice. So where we can put in streets, that's our first choice as providing pedestrian facilities, not to go to a trail if we can put in a street. Second piece had to do, and I always love when people read the development agreement and pull stuff out, make me answer for it. So the second piece was about neighborhood guidelines and whether there are, where you can switch from one neighborhood type to another, and are we setting up a problem with Park Drive? I think there are a couple of things I would say. First of all, the blue that I've shown this is all traditional townscape until we get to the Plat. And frankly, that's true pretty much throughout here. Both of the townhouse projects are traditional townscape. The shelter property is traditional townscape, and so is the whole town center. So I don't think that either from an urban design guideline or a character perspective, it's a problem. We do say that it is based on a block, but we also say that we're looking for 75% consistency on a block and that quirks are good. And we don't actually know exactly how the shelter project will get designed. This red arrow represents about 320 feet of length. And so there may be an interior street that's necessary or other kinds of places that will break that up. And so I think that the way this is laid out is not inconsistent with the expectations of the guidelines. That's sort of the short answer.
What's the length of the Booner?
It's about a lot long, so it's about 80 or 90 feet.
It'll feel kind of like an alley more, it seems.
Right. Number 7, there were some questions about whether the lakeside area would block views from the trail. So bear with me, this is crazy Lucy graphics. So these two pieces are from the Lakeside Development Agreement. This one shows where the neighborhoods are located. The boxes give you the elevations of various points. So this is 452, 440, 444, whereas the seam of this neighborhood is 375 and this one is 350. In general, when we look at it, neighborhoods B, which is right around here, and F, which is around here, they may very well be built up at the high street grade. And so we're just assuming for discussion purposes that these red arrows and the space in between them define the view. So then what I did was, in looking at these grades and then the allowable height of the buildings, which are either 60 or 48, I did a little math, and that would say that up here, the building, the maximum height of building and grades would be 17 feet below High Street, whereas by the time you get down here, it's going to be more like 46 or more. So this grade is, this little section I did here to try and illustrate it, I have to tell you the horizontal and vertical scales are not the same. It is super exaggerated vertically to illustrate it. But this is the grade of the land falling away as you cut through. It's basically, I'm following this orange line as if I cut a section. This is where neighborhood B would be. This would be where neighborhood F is. So you can see where that red line defines the building heights. So here are some of my silly little Lego buildings or Monopoly buildings. And the Lakeside Trail would be about here relatively, and the High Street Trail would be up here. So I think you get a sense that in between those two neighborhoods, there could be some really spectacular views out over the community. And just to answer one of the questions that came up, the Lakeside Development Agreement has very similar requirements in terms of how the buildings are designed.
It's
where
the
they will be
Italian
visible.
mountainside village, right?
That is so right.
Hillside Italian.
Rock on.
There you go.
Yeah,
Hillside, sorry.
Hillside Village.
There were some questions about trees and reforesting the hills. First of all, there aren't really any hills in this plat. But second, when we adopt a development agreement, most of the non-construction standards are sort of frozen in time. So the new comp plan requirements to reforest hillsides don't specifically, don't yet apply to this plat area. But in spite of that, there is still going to be trees planted. They're going to be street trees. They're proposing trees along the linear park, High Street conversion. So there will be things that will provide plenty of trees to sort of forest this area in between the houses. Alignment. There were some questions about particularly tracks D and G and how they aligned. This is the condition that's proposed. I just want you to know that it's here in case you have questions. I'm going to turn it over to Richard to talk about some graphics that they prepared to try and help you understand how that's going to work.
Hi there, excuse me, Richard Rawlings with Polygon. So the reason the tracks did not line up prior has to do with angling the lots so that the houses present to the street at a little bit different architectural angle, curving the road and so forth. And so the tracks didn't line up, but within the track space, the trail itself would be more aligned and more predictable. An interim graphic that we had, for example, would have a kink or an angle point
Hey, Richard, you need to stay at the microphone and use the mouse, sorry.
Old school. What's a mouse? Where are we? So there was an interim, I guess, suggestion where if I'm on the High Street side, you would begin climbing steps, and then somewhere in the mid-lot area, the trail would angle across perpendicular across Road A, and then there'd be another angle point where it would then continue on straight through to the future townhome site. And frankly, in talking with Lucy and staff, it was like, no, we really need to figure out how to get, if we can at all possibly get this to line up. Now, the intent is to be predictable, open, visible, intentional, all those things. So we think we're able to get here, so this is why we brought this tonight, and that's a 14-foot tract with the sidewalk center line is absolutely straight end to end, but within the tract, the sidewalk is angled a bit. So the buffer is what's fluctuating. So it goes, at the narrowest point, there'd be a 2-foot planted buffer, and then on up to the 6 or whatever the normal is on the side. So it's a real challenge because that's also considered, those 4 lots are considered corner lots. And we need to do some architectural treatment and embellishments, which most often for us include some projection of the building, so the building is wider, whether that's a porch or a bay or some kind of projection. And so this is really a challenge, but we think we can get this to work. But this is the response then that we believe you were looking for on the alignment of this this pedestrian trailway.
Thank you for that. I actually think it's a great solution from what I can see. I do have a question, though. You mentioned maybe at the narrowest point, it's 2 feet roughly of the buffer or planted area. Is it actually planted? Is it grass? Is it some combination of things? And then the reason I'm asking that is it goes to maintenance. Who's responsible for that maintenance? If it's grass, is it like mowing that grass would be challenging potentially
Right.
if it's really narrow, that sort of thing?
So the tract would be maintained by the IHCA. In the lower diagram, so that's is that lots 10 and 11. The narrowest point here, which I think might even be slightly more than 2 feet, but this is in the front yard of lot 10.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I wanted to point out is it's not just 2 feet and then there's a wall. It's 2 feet and then there's the private front yard.
Gotcha.
So in terms of what you're seeing visually, it's still green, it's still shrubs and so forth. We wouldn't, we would be putting ground cover and shrubs in the buffer rather than lawn.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, actually, I think this is a pretty good solution that lines up nicely. Actually might give an interesting visual look to it as well.
And if you look at the way the condition is written right now, it sort of builds on that it allowed for that angling as long as there was at least a 2-foot, no less than 2 feet of landscape on one side, and that the total of the landscape on either side equaled the full border. So that you weren't losing any border, you were just kind of averaging to get that angle in. The other piece was we originally, and have typically for several plats, had a minimum lot size for corner lots. And at the request of Polygon and in further conversations with Sarah Hoy from the ARC, we focus less on a prescriptive number and more on the requirement for enhancing the side facades, which is the area that's highlighted. So we're sort of taking out the specificity of exactly how big the lots will be and required that they do the things that the ARC would require them to do, just so that you guys know what it would be, we know what it would be, and the ARC knows what it would be. Okay. Condition 19, we had edited that one. You can see some of the strikeout and underline. But in the memo, I committed to talking to other city departments about ownership. And in doing that, we have some new edits that resulted from that conversation, which is that if Park Drive is extended from 9th Avenue through Shelter's property, then the VUNERF would be publicly owned. But if it doesn't extend through Shelter's property, then we don't really need the VUNERF, and we would go back to having the trail connection that was originally shown in the plat. So that's what the edits here are, to say that by the time we get to final plat of their property, we should be through the, we'll be through their plat, we'll be through Shelter's plat, and we know where we are in terms of that roadway going through both properties or not. And so that will be the time to decide, yes, because we're going through Shelter's property, this would be a VUNERF or whatever, and it will be publicly owned, or no, if it doesn't go through Shelter's property, then we would still want the trail going through.
Couple of questions there. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Go ahead.
So I see this on page 33 of 52 of the report. This is, we request the Park Drive extension be publicly owned rather than private, and that's specifically for the VUNERF we're talking about.
Right.
So to play little devil's advocate, now I'm sure that city plans have, and developer plans have always gone plan and schedule. So in the event that we haven't gotten through this and Shelter and this is ready to be built, what happens?
Well, I think we'd have to have we need an indication, because I guess my point is, if you just have a little VUNERF stub going to nowhere, I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense.
I agree.
So I think that,
Although we have seen it in the Highlands, where there's a couple places where VUNERFs are dead ends, essentially.
that's true. Usually when they do that, though, they're serving the houses on either side.
Agreed.
And so since all of these are front-loaded off the street,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would be necessary.
So one of my questions is, if we get through the Shelter plat and there is a road going through there, if it's a traditional townscape road all the way to the VUNERF, is that publicly owned as well?
That was the assumption.
Okay, that's what
I mean, all the other roads going through Shelter are publicly
I
owned.
just want to understand that, because I wasn't sure where the public and private would stop, or would.
But getting back to what Jeff was saying in terms of playing devil's advocate, I mean, there has to be a resolution to what happens with Park here by the time they start constructing, right?
Well, yes, although I suppose if we have a tool which we can modify plats consistent with the nature of the plat. So I think that right now we've got two options on the table. If there is another option that comes up, before we go to the final plat, we could go through the process of modifying the plat to try and address whatever third scenario happens. We don't anticipate that at this time, but you're right, we don't know everything.
I mean, I'm hearing you say that it's your preference to always build roads, to have vehicles, and it sounds like that's the direction that it's going. I mean, right now, a VUNERF is planned. Your intent is to get a road, an extension of Park Drive. So I guess I'm not even sure how it will ever be a trail instead of a VUNERF.
Well, neither you nor I are the decision makers. So when this goes to the council, they have the ability to make a different choice. I think we've laid out why we think it should be this, but we don't know what will happen. And so there is that possibility that something else might occur. And so we're trying, the challenge is having two pieces moving at somewhat different speeds and trying to anticipate at least two of the alternatives.
Okay. I guess I'm actually, I'm backing up a little bit and starting to agree a little bit with what Jeff said. I'm glad he's back to actually hear that. That if there is an extension of Park Drive and it connects with the Wunnerf, you're going to see an increase of traffic that may not be something that's desired in that Wunnerf, and potentially a safety issue. And then I'll back up what I was saying in terms of it's zero sum. Do we really need a Wunnerf there? I don't.
You know, Jim, that's sort of what I'm thinking is, if Park Drive isn't extended through Shelter, what's the point of the Wunnerf in the first place? Because you said, you know, why would we even have it? It would end, right?
So I think the point is that this plat is going first. You know, there are other locations in which we we anticipate where a road is going to go. We build that stub, and we have that road continue. And a lot of times, we don't even know what's going to happen on that adjacent property.
Right.
And so we're setting up sort of the framework and expectation for the next property development. So because this one is coming through first, we're identifying that we believe that all the street grids should be extended through this property and connect either to Street A or to other streets west of here. And so that's sort of setting up the first stage of it. But that is but Shelters is a separate land use process.
Right. So what are the complications, or really the complications, I guess, if we were to propose or say that if the road goes through Shelter, then you must make a traditional townscape road, because we do theoretically anticipate more traffic. And if there isn't, then you can kind of build whatever you want there, whether it's a Wunnerf or a trail or whatever.
So am I hearing what
implications.
you're saying is you agree with the street, the full connection, you're just questioning whether a Wunnerf is
Wunnerf
the
can
right
handle
tool?
that.
Right, I actually think a connection is terrific, personally, but if it's there, it should be done right, and to me, right means it's a connection, right? Not a Wunnerf, because it will be used, and if it doesn't go through, then I understand. Now, that's why I'm asking what the implications are, because I know this isn't simple, just go, oh, let's just build this road instead of that, because there are, you know, that significantly changes, you know, you may have to pull a house from this and redesign this, and frankly, I can't say whether that's good, bad, or otherwise. I'm sure it's not good for you guys, but I can't take into consideration things like financial considerations of how you're developing this neighborhood. That's not my purview.
Well, right. And I think the thing is, you know, the SDP for Townhomes North had 112, and now it has 111. So
Yeah.
maybe it goes back to 112.
This isn't the
I
first
mean,
time we'll have done that, right?
So I think it would be important to give the applicant a chance to speak to their thoughts about this. But I think from the city's perspective, that we believe strongly in connecting to the grid. We think that a Wunnerf is the right tool in communicating the change from one neighborhood to another. The commission may disagree with that and recommend a different kind of classification, and maybe it's a character street that's, you know, like the ones they've been doing in the townhouse projects. That's basically a Wunnerf with these single paving, you know, single level surface and walkways on both sides. I don't know that that means you're necessarily going to a full street with planting strips, et cetera, but that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, but the argument to say it communicates going from one type to another doesn't hold true when you're down at Federal, right? That's going from one use to another as well, but it's a full street, if you will.
Right. It's going through, actually, So Federal is actually connecting through Shelter, past the Townhome project, and then into this one. So it is, it is connecting. There is a transition, I think, partly through the curve. And we aren't trying to resist all of them. I think we just thought that this one, because of the traffic heading westbound, predominantly on Park, it was important to change the nature of that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. I spent a lot of time there, and I can't imagine that the bulk of the traffic coming down Park is going to head west down into that neighborhood unless they have a reason to go to those neighborhoods. And that, to me, it's more important to have a good connection from Highlands or 9th or, people that live in this western part of the community to be able to get to and from all the places they need to get to and from without everybody driving north or everybody driving south through all the neighborhoods, which would alleviate some of the issues or concerns that people have of losing High Street as a through street, which, yeah. So that's just my thought is if we're going to make a deliberate connection, we should make a deliberate connection and not sort of toy around with a cute little street that we hope people don't drive down, which they're just not going to not drive down it. They're going to use
Okay.
it. Yeah,
I'm going to
that's
let
my
the
thought.
applicant speak for a
That's just my
moment.
thought.
So I think the consequence would be the removal of a lot. And so, as you know, we've got these multiple projects, and they're all kind of on a different path, but yet we've been working on them somewhat simultaneously, even prior to there being a shelter and a polygon. But so, as Lucy's right, at one time, this was simply a trail connection, and then in this plat process, as she said, grading change that would potentially accommodate vehicles dropping down into Road A across this Woonerf. But it was a trail. We've sort of allocated our densities, if you will, and it's more stuff in the sack than fits. So there isn't room within this plat to shift that lot. It would be removing it, and I'm not exactly sure where we would go and achieve it again. So, but that's the influence or the impact to us. I do tend to agree with Lucy that I think there's some value in providing a step down a road that's coming through a commercial parcel and then is dropping in and 80 feet away at an 8% grade. That's, there's the road is ending there. I think during the last meeting we might have talked about it, or maybe it was an internal meeting with staff, but as you said, I think there'll be a group of 5 or 6 or 7 homes that kind of go, hey, that's my route. But as you get up to the north end of our proposed plat, there's High Street, which could be considered to be closer. As you get a few houses away from this Woonerf, now you're down to, I guess it'd be Federal. So that's I guess that's the impact.
I understand and respect that. I just think that people use the path of least resistance and closest to their homes, and there is a concern about. I mean, there's not just the people that live in there, but it's people coming from West Highlands Park. They can use Discovery, they can use Ellis, and they can drive through A and get to High Street. So there are options. I get that. Mm-hmm. I just think realistically, practically, that if there is a road there, no matter how small or large, it's gonna be used, and I just anticipate it being a challenge if it's a Woonerf. Just knowing what I know and seeing what I've seen in the community already with Woonerfs.
I think, Jeff, though, we can approach this if there's, depending upon what the recommendation is or whatever, we can approach it then.
Agree, and I'm not here to tear you apart or take your investment and make it more significant or whatever or losing opportunity. But again, that's not within our purview to worry about that, because I know, like, I suspect, and maybe you can answer this, but by changing High Street to a park, your investment is greater than if you we're keeping High Street where it is theoretically, correct?
It is.
Yeah, so, I mean, I know it's give and take here, so I fully understand that. I would like to understand, are there options to make that road a more, I'll use the term significant road, not knowing exactly the terminology, without losing a lot? Is there something that could be done that would allow you to do that? So whether it's a character street or something else greater than a Woonerf, but maybe not a full-on traditional townscape road. Is that possible? And I'd just like to exhaust those possibilities before we say one or the other.
I think we've looked at not just this issue, but even the pedestrian crossings, those other tracks that we've looked at, like the D and G that we wanted to get lined up and others, the angle of the lots and so forth. I think it was a challenge when we were asked, hey, can you take this thing from a 14-foot path to something that could be a drivable? So I don't think there's a way to cram that, if you will, or to without losing that lot.
Does the city have an opinion on the other types of roads that could go there, or not?
So probably the narrowest road would be about 40 feet with no on-street parking. If you do a character street, I mean, and when I say that, I mean like, sidewalks, planting strips, 2 lanes. If you're doing a character street, it's probably 32 feet or something like that, 30 feet.
What's the current proposed Woonerf width?
20 feet with 3-foot landscape on each side.
26.
Right. But that kind of shares the landscape is kind of shared between the house and the Woonerf.
Right.
So you couldn't just,
Count all that.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So just out of curiosity, is the entitlement for this plat in terms of number of single-family homes is what?
73, but that's part of the overall Westridge entitlement.
Right. So they could be shifted from north to south to theoretically, right?
From your and my perspective, they could be.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Can a Woonerf be one way?
What?
Can a Woonerf be one way?
Yes, we're hesitant to do one-way streets, and the reason is that I suppose in this location, we could think about it. I think one of our concerns is just people tend not to respect one-ways very well. If it's more convenient to go the wrong way down the one-way than they sometimes do. So we try and make all of our streets two-way, but we do have a few one-way streets.
I'll ask another question regarding entitlement, and this is more broadly and sort of a procedural question, I guess, is are there other plats in the community over the years that have had an entitlement of a particular number that, for whatever reason, could not actually hit that number, related to things like this, roads or other, park requirements? And if that's the case, when we get an entitlement for, say, 73 homes, does that mean that the city has to allow those 73 somewhere at some point, or is there some room for it to say, well, only if you can get 73 in there? Right?
So the density range for the property is from 5 to 80 dwelling units per acre. And I believe the Plat is at 6-something dwelling units per acre. And overall, Westridge is relatively low, like maybe 12 or 14 dwelling units per acre. So
You know where I'm getting at on this? It's like, for example, if we were to say, nope, we think it should be a road, and, if that means you lose a lot, that means you lose a lot, is there sort of a legal standing behind that? Or they say, no, we are allowed to build 73 homes, so you need to allow us that opportunity to build 73 homes. That's what I'm trying to understand.
it is their zoning cap. It is what they have purchased. There is not a minimum lot size. There are ways that they might not like to, but they could fit in 73. They could shift it to another parcel, I'm not sure that either the city or the property owner, who gets to say it's 73 or it's 72. I think we would not want to thwart them from building all the entitlement that they purchased.
And don't
And
get me
there
wrong.
would be ways for them to do it. It's not the ways they're choosing.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, my intention is not to make this difficult on the developer. My intention is to take my responsibility seriously here
Right.
and do what I think is right for this particular plat and the whole of the community. And
Right.
I'll be honest with you, I'm thinking, I'm
So
really
Jeff,
thinking-
you haven't taken public testimony and you're deliberating, and so I'm just feeling like we may want to give the public a chance to speak before we get, because we wouldn't be making a decision until after that's occurred.
True.
Okay. I think I'm just about done here, but,
Okay.
yeah, so here's my concluding. I built the thing backwards because I decided to end with my introduction, or the memo's introduction. And what I would like to say is that the reason I'm concluding with this is that it seems like the conversion of High Street is the big kahuna. And, the question is turning High Street into a linear park and promenade worth the effort? And I think the public and the commissioners want to ensure that it's worth the pain, worth the change. And so, some of the things that, examples that we have included are sort of non-park-like things that have been converted into more park-like or very park-like things that have become beloved parts of communities. And Jim brings up a really excellent point, which is that this one is not asphalt at all, but it is a railroad track that was converted, an elevated railroad track in New York City that was converted. And it's not exactly analogous to High Street, but I think that in trying to think about how to have this conversation, it seemed important. We thought about ways of trying to approximate what this was going to look like, and we couldn't find anything that we thought would be good, but we wanted to try and talk about some of the opportunities that would come through the conversion. So there's just sort of like these groups of images that I provided. The top row is really the idea of a linear park, which can be both narrow and wide, open and enclosed, straight and curving. The middle row is just all the many ways that you can not only provide seating, but the variety of experiences that you can be looking out, looking in, tucked away, out in the open, people watching, fixed and movable. And then just the range of activities that they have fit in here in terms of fountains, grass, performance seating, groves of trees, and even water, sort of surface water to play in. And so what we really see in this is all kinds of users using it in all kinds of ways.
And I always love that parks bring warm, sunny weather wherever they are.
Not particularly sunny, but super humid when we were there. So anyway, that's the conclusion of our presentation. Let me find a good image to put up. Some kind of map.
Like the
This
GIS.
one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yep.
Thank you, David and Richard. Okay, so at this time, we're going to go ahead and go to public comment, since I apparently started deliberating and I didn't realize I was deliberating. Deliberately deliberating. Okay, right now we have 3 people signed up. Is there anybody else that would like to sign up to speak?
You can take the top sheet.
Thank you.
if want.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and open the public comment portion of this meeting right now at 8:54, please. And let's go ahead and start with Mr. Robert Swanson, please. Again, please keep your comments to 5 minutes or fewer. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, my name is Robert Swanson. I don't have lawyers. I don't have much of money. Poor little techie guy that works at Boeing and so I don't have tons of time to do everything that all the things that have been presented. We don't have really slick slides. And I only got 5 minutes, so a little frustrating in that way. What we do have is I went and talked to people. Nobody is in our neighborhood. Not one of these people in our neighborhood. Not one of them said yes. It's completely no all the way through, and I have comments from them. And it got to the point where I just stopped going. I could have gone more and more, but I go, why? Nobody wants it. Nobody said that they would use this as a destination location. They said if it was a dog park, yes. If it was a basketball court, yes. If it was a tennis court, yes, they would do it. But for a mommy and me slide, which all they have to do is put it right in that neighborhood. Put the swing right. That will be used a ton. Put it right in the neighborhood. The very first person I talked to, he's a Seattle traffic engineer. His comment was, well, that isn't very smart. It doesn't seem very logical at all. Why would they do that? It was amazing. He was in Starbucks, and I sat down, talked to him. Doesn't live in my neighborhood. He just couldn't believe it. Other people and I apologize, but it's a blatant serving to the developer. The developer is the one getting the most out of this. And the same person said, well, that's a waste. I have, hold on a second. I didn't have a chance to put my pictures up in here. And hopefully, I don't know if this is the right one. There we go, meeting. So this is the location. This is the exact same thing I showed every person that I talked to. I showed them this. I showed them where they're going to cut it off. And I explained to them what currently we have and what they're going to present. And so I just want to let you all know that's exactly what's going on. This gentleman here, this is my car. This gentleman, I just 2 days ago, I believe it was, I was driving up here. I saw him going there, and I see this all the time, people pushing their kids. It happens all the time. There's bike lane number 1, bike lane number 2. People ride their bikes already up and down that place. I talked to him. He signed, he's in the one, this right here is people in my neighborhood. I did meet some people, and so in the neighborhood, and so they wanted to sign, but that wasn't my goal to go in the neighborhood. He signed this. He said no. He goes, I already put my kid, I walk up here. He goes, I want to be able to drive out. I don't want to get trapped, just like everybody in the neighborhood knows exactly what's going to happen during the winter. We're going to get trapped. This is a real location. If you want to go someplace and find a great location, I happen to do photography. This is the look out that we have in our little area that looks directly toward the water, you can see Seattle on a perfect day. On a 4th of July, we watch fireworks from there. This is already there. The other location is not going to be looking that way. The gentleman that's going to be speaking for 5 minutes after I'm done will talk about it. This is from the same location. This is the beautiful scenery we already have that's got a picnic table right there, a barbecue. You can sit there. You can watch sunsets all the time from that location. Beautiful. We don't need the other one that's coming up there. This is another one right by the hospital. I took pictures of their family. This is a beautiful. We got places we can sit. We got fences. We got path. It is a beautiful, beautiful location and outlook. It's got the path already built in. We don't need that other path. This is already there. Why do you want to take away something that we use all the time? Do you know during the winter? I mean, I actually happened to take pictures here. We didn't see anybody. It was a cold day. Cheeks were going, turning red. We didn't see anybody walking around. You know why? Because it was winter. That location, that park will be used very minimal amount of time during a rain, wind. It is not going to be used. But you know what? The driveway, the The road will be used every single day, multiple times, hundreds of times a day, every day throughout the year. I still use it. I go up there to the bus, catch a bus. I walk. I ride my bike. It's incredible. Just a few things.
Quickly, 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I think you know how we feel. I think it's. I don't know what we can change, but I think it's highly unfortunate that the public gets 5 minutes when you can have everybody else gets a long time. So I just don't know how it's going to work out. But all we can say is nobody in our neighborhood wants it. Not one person I've talked to wanted it. And if it's for the common good, which we think the hospital was for the common good, there is not one person that's going to use it for a destination. And the common good, if that's what you mean, nobody in Issaquah so far that I've talked to wants, I take that back. One other person mentioned it, okay? But I've not met one other person that wants it at this point, and I've talked to people all over the place, Issaquah. I've tried to stay away from my neighborhood so you don't think, hey, they're just being self-serving. It is really not the case. We just don't want it, and it's not going to be a destination location. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Next on the list, whoop, there we go.
Timer's done.
I don't even know how to shut that off. Let's see, is it Furker? Sorry, did I butcher that? Oh, okay. I am perfect, thank you. That's what I tell my wife.
So, well, thank you for the opportunity to provide some input into this decision. I know it's a really tough one. You guys have big responsibility here. I'm a bit new to this whole process, but I'm quite surprised by two things. You might be able to respond to this. One is that the fact that, and Robert said this too, there's no response, there's no rebuttal, there's no neutral point to this process. And so I'm curious as to why that is. Again, I apologize that I'm not, totally up to speed with how this is supposed to work, but the information that was presented, all the comments were very positive for this, and so it seems very biased. And even though there's a quasi-judicial process that was defined, maybe you can explain how staff is neutral in this, because it clearly isn't. And so unless I'm missing something here about how this works, I just want to point that out, that I don't know how this is a fair process, and I'm quite concerned that you don't get the chance to hear the rebuttal especially from experts with PowerPoints and presentations that could probably counterpoint almost everything that's been presented. So if you can address that at some point, that'd be great. The other big challenge I think you face is, of course, a well-funded organization that's going to find a way to get what they want. And I know that's very difficult, and I know you're probably used to that, but I'm hoping some of this information we're presenting, I and my neighbors will help with this. Most importantly, I think I want to ask you not to forget to focus on the problem the developer is trying to solve, because it's very easy to get caught up in all the exaggerations and the hyperbole about what this project could be, the perceived, quote, greater good, unquote, that was discussed a lot last time, the supposed, quote, significant opportunity, unquote, that was put into the briefing memo. The developer was proposing a multi-use trail, right? And the bottom line, as is stated in the documents I think I read, is that the developer wants to build a fence. But the urban guidelines, the design guidelines discourage fences, is what I read in one of the documents. So simply to address that, either don't approve the fence, or if necessary, find a way to allow it. It seems to me we're overcomplicating the problem here by going through a whole lot of other scenarios. So simply address that. And in fact, on page 5 of that briefing response memo from the staff, it states, it's possible to develop a property and leave High Street as a vehicular connection. And that should be your first priority. It's not a significant opportunity to provide a unique community facility. It's inaccurately stated in the response memo drafted by the staff. In reality, the opportunities have been available for many years and simply were not pursued. If anybody ever wanted to do anything like this, the opportunities have been there for years. And the opportunities that are currently being presented are also available and sufficient. What I guess I'd like to particularly address is the concept that this could be a destination park, because I think that was said in the briefing memo. In fact, yeah, and it was talked about at the March 20 meeting. The first point to make about this is, and you're hearing this from others, it's not a park. okay? So I think we need to be careful not to mislead the public into thinking it helps check a box that people think this is going to be a park. I believe someone called it a promenade, which is even less accurate. The problem is that no one really knows what we're getting, and we heard this again tonight. At best, it could be referred to as a potentially wider walkway next to a closed road. That's exactly what's being said, and I don't think we should exaggerate that. Then the bigger problem, though, is misleading the public into thinking it's a destination. To get to the bottom of this, I think you need to get answers to some questions. Where is the data that supports the concept? I think Jeff asked a couple of times about data, and I think that's fantastic that we're asking for more information about this. What studies show that that when you build neighborhood parks or expanded green belts, that it's a destination? I don't think there's any data or facts that support that.
1 minute, Mr. Fricker.
My own experience is that small parks or green belts are used by surrounding neighbors that can walk a few hundred yards or so. People don't drive to these locations. If they want to drive, they'll go to Central Park, which is fantastic, and I think it's being expanded. It's got a western view. We saw some pictures. The views from up there are amazing, and yet you don't see people flocking to that. We have those in the West Highlands. We talked about that. And they are very infrequently used, so putting another one in isn't going to make any difference. And I think it's a disservice to say that West Highlands, Pinecrest, and Central Park are inadequate. I think they're great examples. I think the insulting part almost is that New York City, in the High Line in New York City, or Crescent Park in New Orleans, which are urban city landscapes, are anything like we're going to get. That's not what we're going to get here. So looking at those comparisons is inappropriate. And then finally, if it's a destination, where are people going to park? There is no parking. There certainly is no room for street parking. And again, there's no data to support that people will walk multiple blocks across major roads, like crossing Issaquah Highlands Drive, to visit this small area. So please don't let the simple problem get overly complicated. Please require objective, clear, unbiased data and responses from staff, and just keep asking the hard questions. And I would be happy to go through any of that response memo point by point with rebuttals if we had the opportunity. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Michael Zaliski?
Handful of slides here. I'll try to blast through them quickly. PowerPoint might actually work. Okay, Mike Zalewski, West Highlands Park. I'll try to blast through these as fast as I can. I think it kind of puts some pictures to what everybody's talking about here. And I want to just bring a sense of reality here, what we're talking about. I know everybody has this grandiose vision of this, this amazing park that everybody's going to flock to. So I want to follow this, this term greater good that was used a lot last time. What is the greater good? Well, there was no definition. Why does the greater good seem to only infer a park and not the road? The road is the best, or is the mostly used reason for that corridor. Is the greater good as it relates to West Highlands Park? No, because we don't want it. Is it Greater Highlands or Issaquah residents, like Robert said? No, they don't seem to care much about it. Is it for the Westridge North? Well, do they want our through traffic to be routed through their neighborhood? Fine. Does it mean how useful? Like I said, the road is by far magnitudes more useful than any park or pedestrian path. I assert that the greater good is to be used, or it appears to be those of us residents that are actually involved in providing input, and it just happens to be opposition to this proposal. Like Robert also took some polls, got 40+ responses, 0 in favor. Okay, briefing responses. I wanted to provide some comments here. Like it says in quotes, provides the only public area with a view. Wrong. West Highlands Park, Central Park, Harrison Street Park, Pinecrest all have better views. In the intro, 2 examples. Yeah, New York City, New Orleans. Yeah, Issaquah Highlands. Who knew we were on the same level as them? New York High Line was built over an old railroad. Crescent Park was over an old wharf, so none of those replaced actively used infrastructure. Applicant tried many months to meet the objectives. Just take the deviation. Take the deviation, move on, build the neighborhood as is. Interconnection. Interconnection's already there. We have bike lanes and a sidewalk and a road we can use for cars. Lakeside will also connect
The proposed path, I don't know if that really connects. It just connects a stub to a stub. It's literally a 1/4 mile long, which is 500 steps. That's what we're talking about here. Street A in Ellis, I don't believe that provides a safer environment. A route around the neighborhood would be safer, eliminate all that through traffic. Like I said, option 2, like you presented, that's the best. Take the deviation, move on. Applicant response, this is a quote in the memo, talks about what they might put in there. There's nothing unique there. There's nothing to draw anybody. Okay, an example. What if we did this to Central Park and took everything away and made it a path? Like I'm trying to say is that there has to be something unique that's going to bring us to this park. So you got to put something there that's going to bring people in there that's not already available. Views. Western view towards West Highland Park on High Street. Right away ends at the fence, so you're going to look at pine trees and a chain link fence. The central area where the big view platform is going to be, the right-of-way does not appear to extend to the point where you have the deciduous trees, where you have leaves, which will obstruct the view. The eastern portion, yep, you get to look at all that construction for who knows how long, 10, 20 years. Here's West Highlands Park. Like Robert said, great view, it's there. Not a whole lot of people ever go there too much. I think this is what your vision is of the park, but here's an actual park in West Highlands Park. Yeah, there's a handful of people that go.
1 minute.
Okay, greater good decision matrix. Look, all the greens for keeping High Street as is. Again, cars can be used 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, any weather, any condition. There's not, just because there's only going to be a path there is not going to make more people walk down that corridor than with the sidewalk alone. So I put this in, to be a little bit silly, but this is a viable option. Let's put the park over the houses. It's a great solution, better view. It checks all the boxes and requirements. The point is I'm trying to make here is that why do we always have to put the burden on the community and not on the developer? Okay, like I said, option two, do the deviation. Let's build the neighborhood as is. Let's be safe. Let's have a good route around the neighborhood. What are we actually going to get? Well, these are some examples from Westridge South. We were going to get a great meandering forest path. Well, look what we got. We got some loose gravel stairs and some 15-foot fall areas that you can go hurt yourself on. And we were supposed to get a great tree-lined entrance. And look, where's the trees? So what are we going to get with this? Here's some questions you need to ask yourself. With Polygon in the business of making money, why would they spend money to do this?
Time's up.
Okay, well, there we go.
Sorry, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, that's all I have on this list. I know we have more. Anybody else sign up at this point or would like to speak? If you could just give us your name and address, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just want to get back to. Remember. Oh, I think I'm on his slide. I'm trying to get back to your. Is this?
7.
Is this yours, Lucy? Your document?
No, are you looking for
I'm
mine?
looking for just for the lay of the land.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I thought you were looking for one of Michael's.
No, sorry.
That's okay.
So while she's doing that, my name is Brian Smith. I live in the West Highlands area. I think to answer your question earlier, so I've been there from day one. So
Like, is that okay?
That's perfect. Thank you. So I've been in the community since day one. And so, which is probably 2003. So it's been there for quite a while. And that was the only entrance. And beforehand, actually, the path on the other side, I think Discovery was a little patch of dirt. And then I think there was some yelling and screaming and so forth. So therefore, there was a connection put in. But there is definitely a cliff there that definitely needs to be considered. But what I wanted to have you guys do is consider the fact that this area hasn't been built out. And I think someone touched on it before earlier, is that one of the most important things is the roads. And we just don't know what we're getting ourselves into. So giving up a road now, when we don't know the volume. I mean, look at all of those stealing Lucy's, kind of diagrams and so forth. Those are all just monopoly houses. And, each of those houses has 2 cars, maybe 3 cars at least. And cutting off that traffic lane from High Street is definitely going to impact our ability. And I agree exactly what you were saying too, Jeff, is that people like myself are going to find ways to get through those communities. And I don't know about you, but I live in that Highlands area, that West Highlands area, and it's not safe. People are zooming through those roads, and people are going to wind up getting hit, because I think that you're not going to create a situation that's actually very safe. So something definitely to consider. I know that there's potential, like with the school coming in down there as well. So that's something to obviously consider. Obviously, you don't know that, but again, that's another element, to forecast down the road. But again, I think the important thing here is that making sure you have drainage too, because I can assure you that this steep cliff, that water is just going to land down, and it's going to become a swamp, and it's not going to become a destination place, because kids are going to come home with dirty clothes, and no one's going to want to go to Swampy Park. And that's what we kind of have already today in the West Highlands Park area. It gets a little swampy. So that's another big issue I feel, is that the cliff is going to have a lot of drainage. That's probably not going to be considered. And we already see some of that with the new homes that are going over behind the hospital. And then I'll leave you with this, is again, maybe instead of getting rid of High Street, again, kind of cutting through and giving people an alternative to go out onto High Street. So again, keep High Street as is. That's my recommendation, is consider that as you kind of present the information to the council. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to speak at this time? Mr. Kepler.
Good evening, David Kepler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I'm having a hard time getting excited about this thing, but I was up there today looking at the existing trees that are across at the top. Are those planned to stay, or are those all going to come down to get those views? And I know there's a planned viewpoint, but I'm concerned that the trees that are shown there and the trees that exist now on the other side of the fence are going to be pine crest, disappear in the night kind of things. HOA I don't live up there. I'm not going to be paying those dues, but if this thing is done right, it's going to have an awful lot of maintenance. And is it really fair to charge the whole community for this amenity? If it turns out to be amenity, it seems like it's much more, should be tied to the homeowner association, directly tied to this plat rather than the whole community. Also, if we're going to have these facilities on city property, what's the liability of the city if the HOA isn't properly maintaining it, or the rest of the things, some kid gets hurt, whatever, what's the city's responsibility, liability? And my favorite place to go in New York whenever I visit my daughter, and I usually get on the trail twice, is the High Line Trail, and this is not that. Cross section. One thing here, it's interesting. I don't expect the trees to be blocking the views of the houses, but I do see two trails. One more informal, higher, and separating the paved trail. I expect that paved trail is going to be fairly fast. Whether it's with bikes and the rest of that, or if runners are on it, they do a lot better with the bikes than just the families, the strollers, and the slowness. If kids play in that area, having that other trail would make it a lot safer. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bunny.
Connie Marsh, there's so few of you. I live on Squawk. I saw some things in the rebuttal that I have never seen before, which was I saw alternatives, and I thought that was awesome. So I think that's an improvement. It is distressing, as you know, for years. You come to meetings, you make a comment, and then it feels like a rebuttal where the answer is always no. And so I think a lot of progress could be made to provide you all with a variety of choices on the hot topics. So another thing was to create a public process for a park if you so choose to say we should have a park. And I think that that is another step in the right direction. Now, I am never a fan of the linear house road. It doesn't seem appealing to me. That is sort of the parcel of land they are dealt. To take the road and turn it into a linear park, to me, seems like an interesting bright bulb moment that has opportunities. Now, there's some issues. It needs to be connected with something because you don't just walk a little way and go nowhere, right? And so how can it be connected with the rest of the community so that then you would have a loop trail going around Swedish, crossing down and looking at the views for West Highlands Park, and then attaching itself to this? Then you have something going on. Me, I walk all of those areas, but I never walk up the street because, to me, it's ugly. And you have the fence on the one side, and I can't see lakeside, and that would be the most interesting part. So that takes something that I think is just, why even go there, and turns it into an opportunity. And I am tired of missing all of the opportunities in this town to make places that are great. Now, it can't just drop off and nobody goes and we get up, we get something, another muddy small place. So if the community follows along and demands something great, I am actually for the linear park, and with all the other things that we've talked about. West Highlands Park, they keep cutting their trees down that are mandated to be on that hillside, and I fear the same thing for this area. If you plant trees, somebody is sure to say, wow, I want my view, and they go out in the middle of the night and cut the trees. And I don't know how to stop that one. And cars, before people being able to walk in the Issaquah Highlands, live, work, play, walkable community, I just don't see it. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. All right, I think that's all so far that have indicated they would like to speak. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? I'm going to ask a couple of times here before I close the public comment section. Last call, anybody would like to speak tonight on this plat? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public comment portion of this meeting at 9:23. Thank you very much for all of your comments, everyone. Lucy, did you want to respond to anything in particular first, or should we just go?
Wait.
Okay.
I'll respond to what you'd like me to respond to.
All right, so commissioners, this is our opportunity to really dig into this discussion. I think there's a lot on the table, a lot to talk about, a lot to deliberate, really, I think. I will say I don't know where I'm going yet. I really want to have some really good conversation here. We've heard a lot of good things from all sides. I do want to say regarding the process, just because I've been involved in this for quite a long time, that the process really, I don't want to say it hasn't changed, but it's evolved over the years and it's gotten better. But everybody has the opportunity to participate in these discussions. Of course, staff and the developers are going to have way more conversations, deeper conversations, and talk about things really we'll never hear about publicly because it's just a process that takes a long time and a lot of money and a lot of people involved. But they do open it up for public to get involved at multiple stages. And so I know it doesn't seem quite fair, so to speak, but a process has to be in place, and I think we have one that generally works. So I would take this opportunity to say, too, that if you ever want to get involved, you can join a commission as well, because there are openings, and we do love having good people involved. So I will throw that plug in there. I'm not quite sure what direction to go. I've been thinking about this and wondering if we should, sort of look at the three options. That's one direction we could go, and even, sort of talk about the merits of High Street being closed for a park, or I almost feel like I want to talk about the option, at least option 3, and see if that's even an option, which right now, my understanding of option 3 is, alternative 3 is have the homes facing High Street with driveways and so forth. And I'll just throw this out there. I think it's a horrible option, personally. I think it changes everything in a negative way, but I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, one thing that I was going to say is, and along those lines, that what are we tasked to do? One of the main things, or our primary concern is adherence to the development agreement. And one of the things that we've talked about a number of times, that we've discussed, is homes facing roadways. And that's something that I don't recall us ever approving on this commission.
Talking about the backs of homes?
The backs of homes facing streets.
Yeah, which is the alternative 2,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the primary stumbling blocks that I'm having. How can we avoid that?
And actually, if I could back up just a second, because that's a good point, but I want to back up a second, because one of the public comments was that, this is a lot of these things are being done for the developer, and I do need to say that, our decision or our recommendation tonight is going to be based on, a basis of, and the merits of the application as it relates to the development agreement and the rights and entitlements of the developer. We can't just take those away. They exist. So we have to work within that.
That's kind of
that
the
framework.
neutral. You mentioned, was there a neutral? To me, it's the development agreement. That's kind of the neutral.
Right. So this is not it's whether or not we like.
It's the framework, I guess.
It's a framework. Yeah. It's not whether or not we like this or like that, or don't like this or don't like that. You heard me ask and talk about, making a change. Would it require, one or more lots to be changed or maybe even removed? We could make a recommendation like that, and it would have to fit. If we did, it would have to fit within the framework of the development agreement and the rights of the developer, whether or not we think it's right. So I just want to be clear that both for us and for the viewing public, that's the parameters we're working within. So on alternative 3, though, if you don't mind, I'd like to chat about that. Is anybody interested in having a further discussion about the homes fronting onto High Street, and therefore making sure we have driveways and street parking and other things there?
Well, I think to discuss it, if alternative 3 were implemented and tried to stay true to the, I think the vision consistency was one of the first things out of Lucy's mouth tonight regarding all the High Street, it would change the character of High Street. So all the opposition of the High Street being vacated, if you will, and going through that, we turn it into exactly what a lot of the community seems not to want. So it doesn't really solve that problem, and then it sets up other problems.
I agree. Any other thoughts on that, Jim or Tara?
Not on that particular topic.
Yeah, and sort of along those lines, we talk about High Street being a real benefit to the West Highlands Park community right now, and absolutely it is. There's no question that it is. I will say that, and I'm not surprised that nobody there wants to see it change, because it's a convenience thing. That said, I can't think of any street in the Highlands or Tallis that I can think of that is as unobstructed and just sort of a thoroughfare throughway like that one is, even Park Drive and.
Well, there was a word in one of the pieces of public comment that I read, and by the way, I was not here at the last meeting, thanks to Lucy's prompting. I watched the recording. I was traveling, so I read the comment and watched the video. And one of the words in one of the letters was bypass, is what they called it,
Yeah.
and which is the antithesis of what we're looking for in Issaquah Highlands, and hence why vision consistency rang with me so much. I'm on that road a lot. And I don't live there, but I probably use that road minimum 4 times a week when I'm in town. And sometimes I'm running back and forth on it. I'm that stupid guy who runs in the bike lanes. And I don't know how many times I've had to jump over on the curb because people are, I won't say exceeding the speed limit, but they're certainly driving into the bike lanes to cut the corners. It's not, and I know there's sidewalks there. I get that. That's happened to where I go, but there are striped lanes
Right.
that, that people run through. So the bypass, the consistency, the safety, the walkable neighborhood, it doesn't fit the character of Issaquah Highlands to me. That's one of the issues I have with it.
And on that road, I mean, I'm going to throw out some stuff too that sort of in response to what I've heard is, my point about that is it is kind of a bypass and a very convenient, fast road, and I get the benefit of that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're looking for in the Highlands or what was intended from beginning to end there. And that said, also, I heard a lot of things about, people already use it yet. They walk there, they run there, they use their bikes, they take strollers. Of course they do, and we do that on Park Drive and High Street and, all kinds of other roads throughout the Highlands. To the extent that it's not a destination, well, it's not a destination. What's the point of going there right now unless you're going through there or like you said, running? So I don't necessarily use that as an indicator as to whether or not it would be a destination in the future.
It's a little bit jumping into the park discussion versus the High Street discussion, but I want to bring up a point on that. I forget the names. What's the newer development? Is that called Westridge?
West Highland,
I'm going to call it the old retention pond. What is that development?
Westridge South.
Westridge South.
Westridge South. And I bring up the old retention pond specifically because we heard from seemingly hundreds of people that came down to walk around that little retention pond and walk through there. So it was a destination for someone. So there's still things that are draws down there. It certainly wasn't residents that were the only ones that were looping around that pond. So, and I know, I recognize somebody I know that lives up on Harrison Lane, saw him walking down that street with his wife the other night. So people do come down there and walk. I obviously do, too.
And in our family, we're walking all the time, and we hit every corner of this community. And we often go to places that have something interesting to go to and are less likely to go to something that's a thoroughfare. So I need to weigh those things as you do as well.
My concern is there's 3 alternatives, two of which is leaving High Street unchanged. But what is the cost of delay of just leaving High Street unchanged for now and then delaying that decision until later?
Well, I think it's a significant scenario here where, either they have to front the houses onto High Street, which would leave it. It wouldn't even be unchanged at that point. There's only one that leaves it unchanged, right? And that's option 2, which, we would have to discuss how comfortable we are, or what the parameters are around houses where their backs are leaning up, or not leaning up, but are facing the road. It's kind of interesting to me because, a thoroughfare like that, and I consider it a thoroughfare, I personally am less concerned about, the backs of homes facing a road that people are just essentially using as a bypass. And I think more care would need to be taken when there are homes, the backs of homes are up against an amenity like a park, right? I don't think they're the same thing. I actually think there are fewer restrictions. That said, I think one of the questions is obviously what's the merit of this park? So alternative 2 is a reasonable alternative, but what it doesn't do is create the opportunity or allow us to take the opportunity to do something with that space, much like Connie was saying, where we're just going to leave it a bypass, well used and well regarded by the residents, but is that the right decision overall for the community? Right? Then it becomes just the right thing for this part of the community and neutral to negative for the rest of the community.
Right, and my concern is that I live in Tallis. I'm not an Issaquah Highland resident, but there are a lot of pathways that are beautiful, and there's a lot of pathways where they just kind of look like they just met their requirements and that's it, and they're not really providing anything of aesthetic value, other than it's just natural beauty that maybe we have there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the vista point is interesting, but to me, it's not a pivot point for me. I mean, if we have that if we have the park as an amenity, then yeah, I think that needs to be in the discussion, and I would absolutely be in favor of bringing this whole thing to a completely different discussion and understanding what that park's going to be. So I'm looking at this as whatever recommendation we make. If we make a recommendation that says High Street should be converted to a park, we don't talk about what that park is like or worry about what's in it, but that's a separate discussion, much like was laid out in the memo. And I think that would be the right process should we get there. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on what should be in this park. I'm glad we got questions answered regarding the surfacing and the width and the vertical separation and that sort of thing, but I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on that unless you have something you want to share.
Well, I agree that we shouldn't spend a ton of time on it, but it'd be a great disappointment to lose something that the community is already seeing that they're using and kind of it's a multi-use road. It's people are strolling down it, they're driving down it, they're walking down it, there's views. To take out something that's multi-use and put in something that is not used by the community would be a great disappointment.
Personally, I don't see it being not used. If it's done right, and I have a note in here, make sure the park is done right, and I'm even thinking, signature pieces, not just the amenities and furniture, but paving, landscaping, all of that stuff. But again, that discussion, we'd have to have I'll use the term ironclad, sort of statement that says, if we make a recommendation that this turns into a park, that park discussion is separate and deliberate and substantive to make sure that it is something that makes sense, right? So, I mean, I don't know if we can cross off alternative 3, but I kind of want to either get there or not. But does anybody have any strong opinions about alternative 3? Houses fronting that street, knowing that it's going to take significant changes on that street for parking.
To me, it's 1 or 2, and a big component of that is complying with the urban design guidelines.
Right.
So does
To me, it's 1 or 2. I mean, I don't like alternate 3. I don't think that, I wish there was a 4 or something like that.
There probably is, but
You'd like to create matter in space. No big issue.
so okay. So can we all agree that we don't need to spend any more time on
agree,
3?
yeah.
Okay. All right, we're getting somewhere. Okay, so let's talk about. If I could, I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on the Park Drive component of it, because regardless of what happens with High Street, I actually think if High Street is, I'll use the term vacated or converted, then the Park Drive piece becomes more significant to me. What are you guys' thoughts?
So are you referring to the Woonerf
Yes.
within Park Drive? A note I was making, I felt that we sort of got overblown. When you start thinking, and again, I'm not trying to do the traffic engineering, but you and I both lived there since none of this was here, that we're looking at people are either coming from the south or the north, or they're peeling off east and west. Park Drive essentially is in the middle of that, so if they're coming from there, they're going to come in a different way. Or like the rest of us do now, we look at what the traffic is and choose which left turn you want to take to go east, and you look for the convenient route through. And I don't think the going into Park Drive is really going to be that attractive. So having a Woonerf in there that says you're switching character, I'm not sure I'm using the right word, but you're switching character, I don't think there's going to be that much traffic. I think we're getting wrapped around Axel for much ado about nothing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think for me, the pivot point is what happens with the shelter holding properties. If there's a through street through shelter, then theoretically we're doing something right, or even whether there's a through street or not, hopefully we're doing something right on the shelter property,
Right.
and people are going to want to go there. And again, people will use the path of least resistance, so they will drive through that Woonerf or that particular stretch of road.
Well, people want to go there from
West Highlands Park or any of these Westridge communities. That's my thought, is it's sort of an if-then scenario.
I could make comments about being pedestrian friendly, but we've got 2 cars for 2 people too, so
Yeah.
they'll try and walk and get there hopefully for some of it.
And there's a grade as well, grade difference.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's, what do you guys think? And I'm fine being wrong or being challenged.
Or calling me wrong, I get where you're going, so.
No, I'm saying if Shelter doesn't have a through street, then I'm with you all the way,
Yeah.
right? But if it does, then I actually think we introduce a bigger problem.
Personally, I don't think a Vonerf is adequate if Park Street comes all the way down. But at the same time, I don't feel the Park Drive, should be extended all the way down. So I think it should be a trail. I would have much rather seen a street come up to Federal because I think this is mostly egress from that community, the new community. So
Let me make sure I'm hearing you right. So you'd rather have no connection there, no vehicular connection there
Correct.
than a Vonerf?
yeah.
Or
Yeah,
than full
I think
road?
if there is going to be the connection, then I don't think a Vonerf is adequate.
Okay.
I actually think I agree with that. I don't think a Vooner is going to be adequate, but I don't think that putting in another pathway through is going to make much of a difference. They can easily go down to Federal Drive.
Yeah.
So you can invest more in that, or
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could get on board with that thinking where, I think here's my concern, it's probably repeating myself, but if a Vonerf is there, I think it's going to be overused, personally. And so either not have it and do a pedestrian connection, or have it be an actual road, whether it's a full road or this character street or something between a Vonerf and a traditional townscape road. I just think we need to account for more traffic in there than what I think we're accounting for today.
And we're free to make that recommendation.
We are,
So,
yeah. Keith, are you writing stuff up like you used to?
I'm working on it.
I'm just kidding. I saw Keith over there chomping at the bit to want to write stuff up. Am I right? No. Okay, so let's think about that on the recommendation component. Do you agree with that?
I
Okay.
couldn't go there yet.
All right. So Lucy, is that pretty clear what we're thinking? I guess not. We'll clarify a little later. Okay, let's see. Regarding the park, there was a lot of discussion about, or the potential park being on High Street. There was a lot of discussion about, how does this fit into the overall Issaquah, not Issaquah Highlands, but Issaquah Parks plan, and if they're on board with it. Have there been any discussions on that? Okay.
in particular, connecting it to the Swedish Trail.
Not necessarily. I love that idea.
Yeah,
Connie had some
yeah,
great
I
points around
remember.
that.
Well,
Did she-
let me
did she speak and leave?
do one thing
Yeah.
here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, no, that's not the right one. I think it's that one, yes. Okay. So this is a diagram that I used last time, but now that we're a little deeper in. So the solid yellow line is where we have sort of off-street connections, such as the trail down along Highlands Drive or around Swedish. We anticipate, now we have to see if we make it happen, that the trail that you're talking about from here to about here and connecting over, other than crossing Ellis right here, would be all off-street, multi-use path. There would be, along with the forest path that's back behind these lots, there are 2 on-street connections, and then you connect again. So it does begin, it isn't the full loop, but it does begin to complete quite a few elements of the loop.
So the discussions with the Parks Department, they're involved in this or thinking about this, or?
So I think that there are 2 things I would say. One, we are absolutely checking in. They, I think, are given an opportunity to review the plats. They don't tend to review that much unless we say, hey, there's something we want you to look at, because most of these are going to be privately owned or maintained and are driven by the development agreement. That said, we have talked to them about the High Street conversion. They were very interested in it. They thought it was an exciting opportunity. There is part of the Parks Plan, the draft Parks Strategic Plan, identifies that there's a need for a park west of 9th, I don't think they see this as addressing that because they're really interested in city parks.
Right.
And this would be more like a private park, privately owned and maintained, even though it's in right-of-way.
Okay. All right, what other thoughts do you guys have? I have a few others, but I want to talk about, I mean, a lot, okay, I'm going to look at some of the comments here. We talked about the neutral bias, greater good. One thing I want to make note of, one or two people talked about, you know, the roads and the fast drivers. And this, I apologize if this sounds, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, patronizing. It's not meant to be. But, you know, I've heard people say this, not just in this instance, but in other meetings that we've had, that, you know, people in their neighborhood are, you know, driving too fast, and if we have these roads, people are going to drive too fast. We have to remind everybody that these are our neighbors, right? If people are driving too fast in your neighborhood, these are your neighbors. They're the same people you're talking to, saying we don't want this other road taken away. And I mean that in a sense that we all have to sort of work with each other on this. If the person at the end of the street is driving too fast because they're trying to go past your house and it's a danger to your kids, then that needs to be addressed. And it's not people coming from, you know, Sammamish or North Bend or whatever that's going to be flying through your streets. It's those people that live with you. And so I just think we all have to remember that. I have to remember that all the time with me and my driving and my kids driving and that sort of thing. But what I'm getting to is, regardless of how this plays out, that's always an issue in this community, and I think we just need to be mindful of that. We don't want to project out on other people because it's those very people that you live with that are, if they're cruising through your streets, it's your neighbors. I don't think I successfully didn't sound patronizing, so I apologize, but it's also a reminder for me, so. So I heard a lot, too, about, you know, not one person will use it as a destination. No one's going to use it as a destination. I just have a very difficult time believing that. Today, they won't use it as a destination because it's a through road. But if it's properly done, it could be a real amenity for the community. Right now, it's an amenity for those people in that part of the neighborhood, being a road. But this could be a community-wide or larger community asset. And I just don't want anyone to think that it's, you know, that it won't, you know, sort of if you build it, they will come. And that's what I think about this. It doesn't, I'm not saying that that's a decision I've gone to yet, but I want to use that as another data point.
Yeah, and it sort of goes back to my comment of already seeing people who go down there, and it's obviously somewhat for the view. And I think one of the things, the shelter holding property, if it has more, you know, Lucy, what is the current status of the shelter holding property? What's it supposed to be?
Well, they have a
Searching for the
plat
right
in
words.
right now, and their zoning cap in the development agreement is 1.8 million square feet of non-residential retail and commercial.
Okay, so non-residential retail is suddenly adjacent to potentially a nice area, and probably the word you would use would be activates. You know, it's much closer. I think of the little park that I remember scratching my head that's over next to Marshall's with the giant concrete Lincoln logs sitting there, and walk by it at least every other day, and most of the time there's some kid or some parents or something sort of hanging out there. We always sort of detour to go through it, and yet it was one that I went, really, is anyone ever going to use this? And people find these things, and they like them, and they become their little treasures. So, and that's happened all over Issaquah Highlands. We've seen that time and again, so.
Well, to that point, I think, you know, right now, if you go grab a coffee at Starbucks, you're going to go to the new burger place, you're going to go to Jimmy John's or whatever, you don't really have a place to go and eat that lunch somewhere. If there's retail and commercial and so forth, this might be a nice amenity to go. I mean, that's really close by,
So
right?
let's provide trash cans, by the way.
Yeah, true, all those amenities. But anyway, that's just a thought. I mean, I really do believe that it could be a really great asset. I want to address, too, the, you know, the concerns about the winter driving, and they are concerns, they're real concerns. And it's hard for me because I don't live there, and I'm sure I would feel the same way you guys do if I did. But like I said, when you may have heard me say, I live on a 14.5 degree grade, and Carl lives on a, what's yours?
14 and a half. It's 14 and a half on Discovery.
I think it was 15, whatever it was, but it's up there. And, you know, so I think we can say we fully understand what you're talking about. I can also say that those roads are well maintained generally. I'm not at the first snow on that first few hours, but I think there are options coming out of this community, and I can't use that very specific, you know, concern about the however many times it might snow here, 3 or 4 or 2 or 1 or 9, I don't know. And I know we have ice and other things, but again, sounding not politically correct here probably, is no one community is more entitled to, you know, complete unfettered access to their homes than any other community or neighborhood in the community. And I'm not saying let's make it terrible for everyone. Let's make it as best we can, make it easy for people to get around, of course. But these, mine and Carl's streets, 14 and a half and 15, those aren't the only ones in the community. Those are just 2 of a bunch in the area, and there's more all over the Highlands. So as long as they're well maintained and properly, you know, sanded and so forth, then I don't see this as a showstopper, personally. It's inconvenient, and I apologize for that, but I don't see it as a showstopper.
And the image of the man with the stroller, that doesn't look to me like an inviting place to be strolling in that image. It doesn't seem like a place I would want to walk my dog. So it is multi-use, and I understand that, but there's something about that place that doesn't seem very inviting, or that in its current state.
Yeah, I would think if you were walking down a streetscape, you know, having been on both, I would much prefer the other ultimately. Yeah, I totally agree, Tara.
So if I could, I'd like to address alternate 2 right now, and I think this is a real discussion that we need to have, you know, and this is the idea that, you know, High Street stays as is, and all of that aside, you know, not becoming a nicer park. What are your guys' thoughts and concerns and maybe objections on having the backs of homes up against that road? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that also doesn't sound very inviting. I mean, I'm trying to envision in my mind what that looks like, but to me, it looks like, you know, just a bunch of homes that are blocked off. I mean, you're talking about a fence facing the road?
Yeah, I mean, we have fence guidelines and that sort of thing, but let's remember with alternate 1 and the park down there, you have the same situation. Those backs of homes will be up against that. So you're going to be looking at it either way.
Well,
That's not part of the UDG.
to me, I was
Correct.
going to go exactly,
Correct.
give Jim the credit. If it goes back, the reason that the people like West Highlands Park is because it was built respecting all the guidelines in the urban village, and
Right.
then suddenly we want to sacrifice it for something else. I think it comes back to consistency and staying within the guidelines, and why should we switch now to other things? Because we could have switched, well, let's make Park Drive 4 lanes and high speed. No, we're trying to make a different type of community, and it's, you know, for better or worse, it's what Issaquah Highlands is, it's how it's been designed, and we've tried to be consistent with it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, too.
Okay. No, that's excellent. I happen to be with you on that. I think what's interesting is it's the same scenario in terms of what the houses are doing in the backs of the houses, but it's what they're up against and how it's treated on the other side is important, right?
And what's come before.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully, you know, I mean, we also don't want to paint ourselves in a corner and make exceptions, because it will benefit a small, I'll use the term small, in the relative sense, number of residents and homes before we finish the build out here, and then, you know, there will be precedent set as well. To Lucy's point, and you heard me bring it up, there are other instances where the backs of homes are up against or facing streets, and it's almost impossible to avoid that in some areas. But in all of those, in the 2 cases I mentioned, one of them is in an area where the road wasn't envisioned to be in the first place, so that's sort of understandable. And the other one, it's a very short distance where that happens on a road that's extremely,
What's the other one you're thinking of?
at the corner of 15th and Park.
Yeah.
But there are treatments also on that corner to make it not feel like that's the case. So which would not be the situation here. So I'm not necessarily excusing it, I'm just saying that there are probably better reasons for it than.
Well, and
this
it's
one.
also ramifications for the occupants of the new homes as well, right? So it's not just what the West Highlands Park people see as they're driving in and out.
Yep.
It breaks precedent for them, which is unfair because.
It sure does, yeah, you've got all these roads driving past, and
Right.
there might be some security issues potentially and whatever, but, okay. All right, so, I don't know if, let me go through my notes real quick to make sure I haven't missed anything. One thing that I know I made a note on, and it sort of goes to the Park Drive question, is, what was my note? Oh, what our options, our road options would be, and, if that's something that we end up punting to the city council, say, explore other road
I'm
options.
sorry, Jeff, which one was that? Park Drive?
Yeah, the Vunarf to, somewhere between Vunarf and traditional road.
Yeah.
We can just say what our recommendation would be. We can just note it.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking that we find out what the options are before we make a recommendation for a specific thing that we don't necessarily know is the best option, right? So in other words, what are the road options that could go in there with the least amount of impact to the
Would
developer?
go through shelter.
Not through shelter, just that one stub. What's the length of that Vunarf?
About 80 feet,
80
90 feet.
Okay, 90 feet.
I had it in here someplace.
Okay, let's see. I think I got that.
So in terms of Park Drive choices of roads, I'm not sure if that's what you're asking me, but if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
So this is the section that was proposed, 2 10-foot lanes with 3 feet of landscape on either side. Then the next,
And that has parking on it?
no.
This does.
The Heron does.
Yeah.
But the one that's proposed right now is essentially this one.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then the next step up would be to do something like a character street without any parking. So that would be the 2 10-foot lanes plus, say, 6 feet, so you have a foot for the bollard and 5 feet of walking. So that's 32 feet. Then if you went to the smallest sort of street, that would probably be 38 feet for sidewalks, planting strips, and 2 10-foot lanes.
So if I could ask, what currently, in the Vunarf scenario that we have, you're driving one way or the other on that, what is happening to the left or right of you? Are there any walkways, any driveways, anything where somebody's going to cross? What's happening down that
So
corridor?
if I'm tracking, so if it was here,
Yep.
you would be on the side of these lots.
Uh-huh.
Their driveways would be off of Street A. So
The
there,
fences, what's along
their house or
side of
fence?
their-
it'd be the side of their house. There would be bollards just to protect the side of the house, and then landscape.
What kind of bollards are they?
Pretty bollards.
I mean, seriously, I just don't know what, do we have bollards? We have bollards in the neighborhood right now that are wooden,
No, not wooden, metal.
metal bollards, okay. So it's going to feel like you're driving through an alley, basically.
Well, not to me, because alleys are asphalt and concrete. But in terms of the dimensions, probably dimensionally, it would feel like an alley, yes.
But the question for me would be, to Richard, you said with the character street, which is the next step up, that's an additional 6 feet, I think I heard,
On each side.
on each side. So, I mean, even a step up to a character street means the removal of a lot.
Yeah, so any dimension beyond the 26 feet here, and then I'm about to go there, but where the center line is today, you got to then think, okay, well, it's really not just offsetting one lot, and we're really hemmed in, and so I want to be careful that we're not going to then say, okay, it's not really one lot, it's really two. So where that connection is made makes a big difference. As we show it today, if you widen it, it really would be more like 2 lots. If we can
Unless you change
adjust the center
unless you change the
line,
lot size.
if we can adjust the center line over, then we could conceivably sacrifice 1 lot.
It's similar to what you did with the tracks and the trail that are going through. Because on the tracks,
Yeah.
you didn't adjust the center line. Or, yeah, you were able to move it
Somewhat
without.
similar, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so,
Okay.
does that make sense, though?
Yeah,
It's
it
a real
does.
big
Center line.
difference. you know,
It does
1 or
make
2.
sense. And I'm not trying to create necessarily an answer or solution, but I have a question is it possible, in the grand scheme of things, is it possible to adjust, to still get to 73 homes, but adjust lot sizes somewhere in the overall plat where you can still get those numbers, but you adjust the lot sizes appropriately?
I think you could, but it would actually be a number of lots, so I'll just, without doing math, but these are roughly 30-foot wide home. When you start getting narrower than that, you start really having trouble getting in the front door of the home. And so I think our preference would be to find another home for that lot.
To do what?
Would find another home.
Oh, another location for it, yeah.
For that,
Yeah.
for that unit.
Is there room
versus-
for that somewhere in your current entitlements?
I think there is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is a place for, it would be a transition of a single family to a townhome, so there's some economic difference there.
yeah.
But we're going through the SDP for the townhomes north that we've had 1 meeting on with this body, and then we're coming back, I think, the first week of next month.
Yep.
And
Second
so,
week, actually.
and you might recall, we had represented 112 when we first came to that meeting, and that was just a math mistake in our total bucket of density. So in theory, we could trade one of these single-family homes for, and then go back to 112
Right, I understand. Yeah.
at the townhome.
Yeah, and I hope you understand kind of where I'm coming from on this. I have no intention of taking away your rights or entitlements, which is not something I could do anyway, even if I wanted. I'm just trying to figure out what I feel is right for this particular community.
Yep.
So, and I don't know that that's the answer. It's just something I'm considering.
It's possible.
Yeah, thank
For sure. And candidly, we would rather do that than not proceed.
I understand. Thank you. One question. This might be just a general question, Lucy. I'm looking at page 19 and 52. The High Street is not actually part of the plat, is it? I mean, the actual road is not technically part of the plat. Is that correct?
It's not part of the property that they're subdividing.
Right, okay, so technically and this is what I'm trying to get to, is technically what they're doing is they're saying, here's what we'd like to do, and sort of in exchange for that, and in addition to that, we will invest in something outside of our property line in order to make this work.
Yes, although I will just say, as a small friendly amendment to that, you know, whenever you're platting land, you're going to be connecting into adjacent and
Sure.
impacting bounding streets.
Sure.
And they're just doing that much more extensively in this case.
Right, okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that boundary line.
Can I still ask a question? I'm sorry, do you want to, go ahead.
I'll just be quick. So I'm still trying to envision how a pedestrian is going to kind of enter and exit that area. So if say there's a runner going down this pedestrian walkway, how do they enter and exit it?
High Street or the Wooner?
High Street, that's what you're referring to, right? The proposed park.
Oh, sorry, the High Street.
Okay. Right now, the plans show bollards. We haven't, there's actually an approval condition on that. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but because there was just simply like bollards in the road and then it's trail.
It's a little bit like the way you enter the trail that runs between the new homes in Swedish that has bollards as you round that corner. Bollard. Be the northwest corner of Swedish where the trail's wrapping around. You go from goes to the sidewalk, and I think it's got like 2 bollards before you enter the trail.
Okay. Sure. But I think that the difference that we see is just in making this corner, it's got to be relatively comfortable and very obvious that you're having to turn, and that may require, say, putting in a band of concrete so that, and it may require something, because Public Works operations still needs to get in and maintain the utilities that are under the road. So there is a condition that whole, the ends of the trail need further study to both to safely keep cars out, to non-verbally communicate it. So there's a level of detail if the plat's approved that we would spend time understanding how that transition
And I'm not
occurs.
trying to understand sort of the solution. I just really what I want to make sure is that this is not just serving the houses in that area, that it's actually going to be serving the greater good of the community, and that people who maybe aren't living in that neighborhood would be able to enter and exit it in a friendly way.
Yes, I agree.
Condition 37, the new condition.
Yeah?
I just want to see if there's a clarification in here. Following preliminary plat approval, et cetera, PP 170001 will go to the commission. Can you specify the Urban Village Development Commission, or is it a different commission?
No, we're thinking it's the Urban Village Development Commission. We would like for it to be the Urban Village Development Commission, but if you guys were gone, and we needed a commission, we wouldn't want, we thought we should just say commission.
So
But our expectation is that it's the Urban Village Development Commission.
And my concern there is that someone makes a decision and say, now let's send this off to the DC or to somebody else, and I too think it should come to this commission. I would, if okay, I'd like it to say, we'll go to the Urban Village Development Commission, or, some other language that says if they don't exist, then to, an appropriate commission or whatever.
Okay? So I've got, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but what I would do is just start typing up these edits for you guys into the motion, so we have that.
Please do.
Well, I want to make sure
Oh, you want to
that
wait
you're-
till we get there? Okay.
Well, no, if everyone agrees, I'll go ahead and put that in here. I
would
just,
agree to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
okay.
All right.
I still had a question about the road.
Go for it.
We talked about going, well, poor Lucy has to try to do this. I know when my kids come up to me when I'm in the middle of something, I can't do both things, but it's just copy and paste, Lucy. We talked about upgrading from a Wunnerf, it's a character street, and then is it a major road, or what happens next? What's the next one? Because Richard answered that, provided we could adjust the center line, that it might only take away one road or one house, one lot. Well, my question is, does the next jump up and the same thing be accomplished? Because I'm still not sure a character street is that much better than a Wunnerf. if we're talking about that.
So I think you would need to, so the difference between a character street and a street, the travel lanes are two 10-foot travel lanes,
Regardless,
regardless.
yes.
So then
And
the
a Wunnerf.
question is, you have bollards and walkways, or you have curbs, planting strips, and sidewalks. So I guess my question to you is, from a car perspective, it's the same. From a character perspective, it's different. It might communicate that change of neighborhood more, unless that's what you're trying not to do.
No,
But in terms of the vehicular circulation,
I'm concerned that there's going to be quite a bit of traffic on whatever the thoroughfare is. Wunnerf, Character Street, Main Street, whatever you want to call it. And I'm concerned about potentially people walking down that street as well. And in a Wunnerf, You're assuming that
provides no
there's,
room.
what's that?
This one provides very little room.
I
for-
actually
Yeah.
think pedestrians are going to be a significant component of that because
Yeah.
they're not going to walk up.
Correct.
Over
And
to Federal
so
or up
that's
to-
why I'm more along the lines of actually not making it a character street either, but a real road with walkways.
So, but I don't understand why you think that that is, I don't understand how you're perceiving the difference between a street and a character street.
I think it's safer for
pedest-
pedestrians.
How?
We're talking about defined walkways.
Well, Character Street has that too.
Well, we're talking about raised, correct? Aren't we on a main street? Aren't we talking about curbed?
Right versus bollards?
Yeah. I guess I think of, I mean, where I live, which is not in the Highlands, we've got plenty of paths along the side of the road, and they're separated with a green little bit of grass.
Mountain strip.
And I don't think that those are nearly as safe as having raised walkways, personally. I don't.
Okay. I would say that a grass strip in the same plane as the road is not as, there's less level of pedestrian protection than bollards or curbs. I'm
True.
not sure I
True.
would evaluate that bollards are less safe than curbs.
So,
Okay?
I mean, it would depend on the frequency of the bollards.
Yeah, yeah.
so my take on this component, if we get there, is, and I don't necessarily want to make it open-ended, but to make the recommendation that if Park Drive goes through the shelter property, then this either becomes, then this becomes the appropriate type of road to make that connection. And I don't know if we have the city council decide that, or if they propose something and say, here are the two options that we could go with, or what. But I don't know if it's, I'm not comfortable saying it should be a character street or a traditional townscape road. I just,
Okay.
that's what I'm thinking,
I'm
but
okay with that.
I don't know
I'm okay
if
with
that's
that.
unfair
Something
to,
upgraded from a Verner is what you're saying.
an appropriate
Okay.
road
I'm
with
fine with
protected pedestrian
Yeah,
walkways.
I'm good with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I don't know.
Because
that
I don't know the best either.
Yeah, I'm
so-
not sure I'm qualified to say it should be this type of road or that type of
Yeah,
road.
I'm good with that.
But I don't know if that's fair to the city council to make that decision, but they may have a better sense.
So my friendly colleague, phone a friend, what he recommended, because what we're hearing is that you want segregated pedestrian facilities.
Yes.
And so what we would recommend is that the conditions say that the connection associated with this plat will provide segregated pedestrian facilities, and then we, either through the council process or separately, staff will figure out what is the appropriate facility within the
Correct, provided
context.
there's a road that's connected from Park through the shelter properties. Yeah, I'm good with
Are you
that.
comfortable with that?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, colleague. All right,
Okay,
okay.
just leave- can
So
you-
I think we've hit on pretty much most, if not all, of the topics. I will say that thank you for all the other work on the other topics and the responses to them. I think that a lot of them were very well clarified, and I appreciate that, and I don't really have any further issues or questions on that. I think now it comes down to how do we feel about, the direction of our recommendation, to take to convert High Street to a park, given all the other stuff that we just talked about. Anybody want to venture an opinion?
Jump into that tar pit.
Yeah.
Personally, I think.
Can we have the options back up, please, Lucy?
The three alternatives.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You want to see how fast I can dance?
I was just going to say, personally, I can't get my head around why we wouldn't recommend the option that adheres to the guidelines.
So we're talking about alternative one, converting High Street,
Yeah.
and going into a process that will identify and hopefully create the right answer for the park, right?
Yeah.
and making sure that that Park Drive connection is sufficient if there's a road through there. And do we all feel comfortable that there are enough alternatives for vehicular traffic to get in and out of not only this community, but West Highlands Park and the surrounding communities?
When you say alternatives, do you mean alternative roads or alternative options?
Alternative roads that are planned here, Ellis, Federal, High Street to some degree, Street A? Street A is
Street A
Street
is
A.
the one through the middle of the
Yeah.
Plat.
And then
Potentially.
theoretically Discovery, Federal, Discovery, Ellis, Federal, and potentially Park. Is there any objection to that thought? Does anybody think there's not sufficient access? Carl?
I'm sort of doing math and combinatorics up there, and I'm not even sure it's a positive. I think it's the same number because it goes up to the same locations and everything else is additive for Low High, Park, Federal, Ellis.
Yeah.
We've added all those in, they're all the same in the others, and they all connect to the top of High Street.
So, and I'll admit, I've driven to West Highlands Park, and I've walked and I've biked and, done all those fun things. Right now, the two primaries obviously are High Street and Discovery that we see. And the Discovery one, there's that steep grade, but people still use it. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
I just don't know the percentages. It seems to me that by adding Federal and Ellis, and you're actually creating more opportunities
Right.
for people to move out. And a lot of those people that are going up High Street are turning right from High Street onto 9th to go down to the freeway or to the gas station or whatever. You would actually be cutting off some of their space or distance traveled potentially.
If Park. Yeah.
Maybe not as fast if they went up Federal or Ellis.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not going to indicate, I don't know the numbers or anything, but it seems to me it's given them more options, and it is taking away a very significant and, I'll say, loved option for them, but
It goes back to what Jim said
Yeah.
about the guidelines, and I
Yeah.
agree. We've tried to do years' worth of decisions based on the guidelines and the agreement and the standards, and that's not the guidelines. That's how I view it.
okay, I'd like to just take a straw man here, if that's all right, which is not, I want to get into the conditions for a moment after this, but a straw man, is everybody at this point, are you in favor of moving forward with alternative one, considering the conditions we're about to talk about?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so let's talk about this motion for approval.
So let me just show you what I've done, and then you can tell me what else I need to fix. So the motion remains unchanged. The revisions to condition 25 is unchanged. And then there are two amendments that we've proposed for tonight. One is I changed, I believe, this section right here and this. So I took out concrete because it will depend on what
Yep,
the thing is, and then with segregated pedestrian facilities.
and
Yeah, as long as,
in your parlance, does that mean we look at a road standard of some sort with these characteristics and decide what goes there? Or do you create something new?
No, we would start with existing options.
and again, just to clarify, segregated pedestrian facilities means bollards or something along those
Or
lines.
bollards or curbs or something, yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to put that in there? Does that,
I don't know if it's not particularly, if it's not absolutely defined, then yeah, I think we need to probably put that in there.
Or, I don't know how prescriptive we can be
Yeah,
there.
I don't,
But yes, okay. Okay,
thank you.
all right, 37, we'll get it. Okay, and then 37,
is just clarifying the commission.
Okay, thank you for that.
And then do we have something about the park process, not Park Drive, but park?
That was already in there,
That's 37. This is just.
Oh, okay.
right?
Comes to us.
And that's on page 24 of your packet. If you want me to pull it back up on screen, I can do
That's okay,
that.
I'll flip to it here.
Yeah, we've got it. Thank you. Okay,
So Lucy, maybe just put or successor after UVD.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
You need to go up to the podium and talk?
you miss us, don't you, Keith? Okay. All right, are you able to print that, or is it something we should start with this and then
Well,
look
what
up there and read it from there, or what?
Yes, I would, so if these are all the changes, I would delete that, and so we get, let's see if I can get it to, not quite, let's,
So whoever's going to read this, I will give you this piece of paper. You can start with this. Wow. Okay, as amended tonight.
I just tried to get it all on
Gotcha.
screen. Is it too small to
Depends on
read?
You gotta
reading
scroll anyway, so, would you? No.
Would you like it bigger? I can make
Large
it,
enough for you to read, Jim?
Nope.
One of you
It's
is
just-
reading
I just
that.
can't read it.
Okay, before we read
physically read.
anything, I want to know, are there any other conditions or amendments or thoughts that we need to get on the record before we make a motion? I don't have anything. I think
I know it's no.
I've addressed everything. What we didn't talk about was something that David Kapler talked about, and that was, maintenance, cost, city liability, and that sort of thing. I think that's, if I recall from our last discussion, that's, IHCA would maintain, but there are processes in place where liability is already defined and,
so we have maintenance, Susan's gone. We have maintenance agreements for the facilities that the IHCA maintains that belong to the city. And we actually mentioned in the memo that we would have a maintenance agreement with them for this facility.
right?
Well, and the other aspect of that he was talking about, would it be to the immediate property, which runs counter to my thought that it is greater good of the entire community if other people come, if I'm coming to use it, I should chip in and pay for it. So I think that makes
Right.
sense.
I agree
It
with
is for
that.
greater good.
Yeah, okay. All right, so who is in the mood to read and make a motion? Carl?
You need me to
So,
make
let
it
see.
bigger?
Read this.
I'm trying to see how much I can read on paper.
You can read
read that
down,
first.
you could just, so you read you read this paragraph, which is on your sheet, then you skip 19,
Got it.
then you
And
do 25, then you're on screen.
Yep.
Okay, so after skip
add-
19, go to 25.
And
so-
then you'll say add and as amended tonight. and we'll go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see, motion for approval, Westridge North SF preliminary plat. I move that the Urban Village Development Commission recommends approval to the City Council of the Westridge North Single Family Preliminary Plat, file number PP 17-000001, as described and evaluated in the staff report dated March 9th, 2018, and plat drawings received, March 21st, 2018, staff memo dated April 10th, 2018, and subject to the conditions as identified in the staff report, revised or new conditions in the briefing response memo, number 19, number 32, number 35, number 37, number 38, and with the revision of the following conditions. Revised 25, corner lots defined as lots adjacent to the intersection of two roads or a road and a trail or adjacent to the Tract A Park shall have enhanced side facade treatments, parentheses, on the road, comma, trail or park side, close parens, including porches and/or bumped-out windows. The Issaquah Highlands ARC has purview in selecting the appropriate architectural features, such as a side porch on the following lots: 1, 10, 11, 23, 24, 30, 31, 36, 37, 44, 45, 52, 53, 65, 66, and 73. This will be reviewed with the building permits for these lots. And as amended tonight, if Park Drive is extended from 9th Avenue to the western property line of IHIF Commercial's western property line, commonly known as Shelter Parcel 272-406-9208, Park Drive shall be extended from Street A to the project's eastern property line. The applicant's responsibility to extend Park Drive shall remain within the project limits of this plat. The northeast Park Drive extensions shall be a public, narrow facility serving vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, which will slow traffic and convey it as a residential street. The road section shall include 2 10-foot wide travel lanes with segregated pedestrian facilities such as bollards or curbs, period. This will be resolved by final plat and reviewed with site work permits and the final plat. If Park Drive is not extended from 9th Avenue, this connection shall remain a trail consistent with the neighborhood trail standard. Number 37, amended, will go to the Urban Village Development Commission or successor for review. Finally, and I move that the Urban Village Development Commission direct the Development Services Department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the UVDC chairman, affirming the UVDC's decision to approve the Issaquah Highlands Westridge North single-family preliminary plat, file number PP 1700001, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, modified in the staff memo, and as amended this evening, period.
Thank you, Carl. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
You've got to read.
You have to read it. No. All right. So motion by Carl, seconded by Jim. We'll take a vote now. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. That was
So I have
fun.
one other little thing.
We have more. Yes. I was just saying thank you on that particular thing. It's not over yet.
You had asked about Westridge South and the landscape for the entry road. And so what this illustrates, on the right is the landscape plan for that. You can see the trees lining the street. Sometimes they're behind the curb, sometimes they're in front of the curb. It's partly driven by existing utilities, unfortunately. The tree that was proposed is the Zelkova serrata, and the pictures on the left are examples of that tree lining a street. Give you a sense of what, as that matures, what that street might look like.
Thank you. What, and the one on, so all of those are
Those
those
are,
streets?
so I used my trusty staff person who's trained as a landscape architect, and I said, give me pictures of Zelkova lining the street. So that's what she provided. So
Clearly, the bottom left is more mature than the upper left.
But the one on the right also is the same tree, and that looks, so depending on how they grow and
how they're limbed.
and everything. Okay.
And so I would guess these are young, these are younger, these are older. It's also going to depend on the light conditions,
Sure.
several things.
But
But I
certainly-
think what it does indicate is that the trees are capable of creating that sort of frame
canopy.
that you're
Beautiful.
looking
Yeah,
for.
I think it's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Okay, any other new business or announcements from anyone? Okay, so I have a note here. At one point, we talked about the meeting being like on the 1st or 2nd of May, but it looks like it's on the 8th. Is that the correct date?
No, I think it's on the 1st.
Okay, it's on
said
the
8th.
on the
Wasn't the
agenda.
next.
It says May
Yeah.
8th, and I was concerned because I'm not in town on what May 1 is the Tuesday. So it's not important whether I'm here or not, but I'm just saying if it's May 1, I can't be
Thank
here.
you for letting me know. I will follow up tonight.
But May 8th, I plan to be in town. So
Okay.
So May 1st, I'll be here. May 8th, I won't,
Okay.
just if you're keeping
All right.
score.
Okay, so if there's no other business, I would like to thank everyone for all their time, work, and energy on all of this. And go ahead and close the meeting at 10:29, right on time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's just a.
Yeah.